My name is Garth Ancier, and while they were still a meaningful television business, I mostly ran television networks, and started 2 of them and ran probably 20, including cable networks.
So there was a day where you woke up in the morning and you had no idea this thing, Fox, was coming. And when you go to bed that night, you knew. And you've now known the rest of your life. Tell me about that day.
Well, I was aware that day that Rupert Murdoch and Barry Diller wanted to start a new network. It was on my radar because Rupert Murdoch had become a U.S. citizen to buy the stations. So it was on my radar, but when they contacted me to interview to be head of programming, I was like, they found me out of all these people, to talk to. So I was intrigued by that. Also very intimidated because in the history of television, there's only been one other serious attempt, and that was for the Dumont network in the 50s, which did not end well.
Would you talk about that?
Dumont?
Yeah.
There had always been this theory when I was growing up that there was room for 2.5 networks. And that was ABC, that was CBS and NBC as the networks, and ABC is half a network. Dumont came on the air and had some amazing early shows. They did the early Jackie Gleason shows. But the network couldn't keep itself together, and I think went off the air in late 50s, if not maybe 1960, I guess.
Okay, so you know there's going to be an attempt to make a 4th network.
Yes.
But, I want to go back a second because you said something interesting. You said something, the gist of what you said was like, of all the people they could have called, why are they calling me? Can you talk about that for a second?
Well, I don't know why I don't know
well,
that.
What were you doing at the time versus the other people?
I was head of current comedy programming at NBC, so I had the top 5 shows in television reporting to me. I had Cosby Show, Golden Girls, Cheers, Night Court, and Family Ties. So, and NBC had more than all the other networks combined of comedies. So, and it was a point of pride for me that like, oh wow, we can actually make this many shows work at the same time, 16 comedies at the same time on one schedule. And I think that may have been one of the reasons they called, but it still took interviews with Jamie Kellner, who was president of the new company, and Barry Diller, and even a little bit of an interview with Rupert Murdoch before they offered it to me.
So you're in a pretty safe job, doing pretty well.
I was in a very safe job, yes.
Why would you leave?
Because at the time I was 27 or 28 years old, and my rationale was, if you're ever going to do this in your life, you're going to do it now, because you're not going to do it when you're totally, tied up in, in a lifetime career at NBC, and even if you're president of NBC, you're not going to leave. This was the one point where you said, you know what, it might be worth the shot.
Got it. So, talk about that first meeting. Was it Barry Diller, then Rupert?
It was, yes, Barry. Barry at his house.
So you walk in.
I walked into his house on Coldwater Canyon, and in the den, and talked to him for like 3 hours, and just about television. And if you know Barry at all, he is someone who came out of television, as most feature film people did at that time, including Michael Eisner. Barry was head of programming at ABC when he was in his 20s. So, and Michael was his lieutenant. And there were amazing people around them, like Marcy Carsey and people like that. So Barry, that was the most intense interview because Barry, coming out of television, knew what he wanted to ask and what the philosophy I had in my head was. But why he then decided to go forward, I don't really know.
Talk about it for a second. You said the philosophy in your head.
The philosophy in my head is that most television shows are versions of extended families. Whether it's the Today Show, which is a surrogate husband and wife team that started in radio on WOR with Ed and Peggy and Fitzgerald, or it's Family Ties, which is a family, or it's Golden Girls, which is a family. They're all families. And even Bonanza was a family. And so you have to look at whether it's an actual family, a surrogate family, how the pieces fit together, and how you make it from there. Otherwise, even if you do a workplace comedy and you don't, in your head, think about it as a family, it's not going to function and relate to the audience at home. So, for example, Cheers, no one's related to each other, but it's a family.
Beautiful. Do you remember any of Barry's questions?
I don't. It's too long ago. I remember it being 3 hours.
I met him once as he was starting his quasi-retirement. He was still intimidating, but he was an older guy.
He's still intimidating. I've worked for him 3 times in my life. He's still intimidating. But the reason he's intimidating, the reason Barry is intimidating, is he's really, really smart. And he can tell if you're fibbing. He can tell if you don't even try. I mean, it's a great executive experience to try to lie to Barry Diller and then see how fast he realizes that you're full of shit and he's going to call you on it. So it's a great experience for executives because in Hollywood, we have so many executives who are so prone to bullshitting. And Barry is just like, he has a bullshit meter. He'll see it. So whenever I work with people who work with Barry, I go, I'm trying to do you a favor here. You have to be willing to die on the tied to the railroad tracks if you want this show to go forward. Because otherwise, it's not worth doing. So don't just pitch shows. Pitch your favorite of all time, I'm willing to die on the railroad track shows.
How did you think the meeting went when you walked out of his house?
I thought it went well.
Great. Then you meet with Rupert.
Well, Rupert was more, later in the process, and it was much more cursory because he was going to trust Barry and Jamie to hire whoever they wanted. But it was, I remember having lunch with Rupert just the day I started, and it was like. And, I'd heard all the stories about, what he'd done in Britain on Fleet Street and things like that. And so, I wasn't trying to poke the bear. I was kind of just asking, so what happened to these newspapers and the printing presses shut down? And he's a very rational guy. And he says, well, I tried to make a deal with the union and they didn't want to make a deal. So I couldn't keep these papers afloat. So we came up with an alternate place to print the papers and then moved everything over. I mean, it's like the way he explains it is not the way, I think the printers union on Fleet Street in London would explain it. But it's very rational.
So let's go back a bit. You worked under one of the people considered to be the Mozarts of this business, Brandon Tartikoff.
Yep.
Talk about, and obviously this is all about the Simpsons. If you could tailor your answer, what did you learn from him? What did you take away from him? How did he train you to allow you to have the career you would ultimately have?
Well, Brandon's big strength is that he was wildly creative, and he allowed, and he really encouraged everyone around him, not just me, but all the other disciples to take creative stabs. And to this day, I still feel like if I'm not taking a bit of a creative gamble, why bother doing a show? So, there were shows we did at NBC, which I think, in retrospect, I think, oh my God, I can't believe I worked on that show. We did a show called Mr. Smith. And Mr. Smith was a talking genius orangutan. And It was like, wow, this will be interesting. He's a genius, and he's an orangutan. He talks, so his mouth has to move sort of in sync with whatever we're putting in his mouth. And we've got to shoot this with a real orangutan, because otherwise it doesn't, we didn't have like sophisticated effects.
You greenlight that or cover it?
No, I didn't. I was assigned to make it work.
So
Brandon greenlit it.
So let me ask you this: what's going back to what you said earlier that was beautiful about how you see television and why you would greenlight or not greenlight a show? What's going through your head when it's like, hey, today you're covering the orangutan?
We also had Boomer the talking dog. Here's Boomer.
What's going through your head with your strategy, your theory, philosophy, as you put it, of what leads to a hit show? Like, what's going through your head when the supposed Mozart of greenlighting is like, yeah, here's the orangutan show. Good luck.
I always thought like Brandon would have great out of the box ideas, and like all people who have great out of the box ideas, some of them you need to kind of suppress, but you admire him for doing them. I remember after Brandon left NBC, he and I talked about a show he was developing with Tribune to do a local game show in every market. So all the questions would be local, it'd be live. And I go like, well, that's a show I haven't seen yet. But he never got on the air. And so we talked about producing it together and all that kind of stuff. I just thought the ideas were fresh.
Did he ever greenlight a show that you had to cover and do where you're like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard, and then it became a hit?
And then it became a hit.
Yeah. I guess he does know something.
I'm sure, but they're not, it's not, I mean, their show, it depends what you call a hit. Is Punky Brewster a hit? I mean, they've tried to redo it. Soleil Moon Frye is still out there, doing documentaries and specials about it. It wasn't a hit. It was an okay show.
Got it. Back to you. Is there anything that you greenlit when you had, within reason, ultimate power?
Right.
You're like, why did I do that?
Oh, I'm sure there are those.
Here's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, okay, yeah, please.
I'm asking these questions. I'm always trying to put myself in the audience's shoes and give them the context. Everybody knows when they hit play, Simpsons is one of the biggest hits in the history of entertainment.
Sure.
But they don't know how the business works. They don't get the context. They don't see the failures and the problems and the risk involved. That's what I'm trying to get from you right now, because you were on the front lines for 30 years.
Yeah. Should I, do you want a failure first?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of there are quite a few. I mean, there was a show I did with George C. Scott for the beginning of Fox called Mr. President, which was, George C. Scott was the President of the United States, but he allowed no one on stage for the rehearsals. So we had to watch the rehearsals on like a cam on stage and then give notes. And it had some great people in the show. Madeline Kahn was in the show. I mean, it was well cast. It just never quite knit. And I kept thinking to myself at the time, we're going to have George C. Scott. He seems like, he's Patton. He's the president. This should work. But we never got it right. And it was one of those things where you go like, wow, that was a big miss.
Do me a favor. Dig in, focus on the words you just used. We never got it right. What do you mean? Give me the details of what you mean. What are you doing to try and fix it that ultimately wouldn't work?
Well, we tried to create a family structure out of, George C. Scott and also Madeline Kahn as a surrogate wife. I think she may have even been the first lady. It's hard for me to remember at the time. And then Conrad Bain was in that show as well, and I knew him from Different Strokes. So we tried to create an ensemble of a family structure, but the writing never quite got there. And you know, most political shows, it's very hard to do something inside a White House. I mean, you got to give it to Armando Iannucci for Veep, because that's a very tough thing to pull off.
This is exactly what I'm trying to get at. Why? Why is that hard to pull off?
Well, if you look at Veep, I mean, Veep is that guy. You know, he did In the Thick of It. He's done a lot of political comedy in Britain. You know, first of all, he had a great cast, but also the writing was so tight. There were more jokes per page on that show. I mean, you couldn't watch Veep without realizing that, let's say the average sitcom has 3 jokes a page. This one has 7. And it's single camera. That's really a serious writing challenge. And it's all at a much faster pace than most shows. And so he had invented a way to make it work that most people, and screwball side characters, and the thing went on forever. And I just admired it because he had cracked something that most people have never cracked.
What's a show, anytime, ever, that you're like, this shouldn't work, why does it work? And it works. Like, it's a show that's very successful, and in all of your green lights and all of your training and all of your knowledge, you're like, I don't get it, this shouldn't work. Nothing about this should work.
You know, there aren't a lot of those. I mean, you know, of all the shows I put on there that are successful, the one I'm most embarrassed by was buying Fear Factor, because it was the beginning of the reality TV age, and I go like, well, this is just about humiliation. And John DeMol said, no, it's not about humiliation. It's not, we're not doing anything to torture these people, but if their biggest fear is eating, you know, chocolate-covered crickets, which is a delicacy elsewhere in the world, then we're going to see their anxiety eating chocolate-covered crickets. If they're afraid of dogs, we're going to put them in a dog-safe suit and have them chased across the field by a pack of dogs. I'm like, well, that seems like you're playing on all their fear. Yes, it's Fear Factor. And it's based on a show he did in the Netherlands called Now or Neverland. I don't know why it was called that, but it's like, it's so cynical to say, okay, let's plan everyone's individual fears with their worst fears and then put them right in the middle of it. I thought, like, okay, this will work, but I'm going to be embarrassed to mention it to people going forward.
Beautiful. That's exactly what I was looking for. So let's go back to the 80s for a second. And now, you know, all these questions have been about you and what you did or your...
whatever, yeah.
This question, I want you to be a witness. You're a buyer, but I want you to talk to me as a witness.
Okay.
What was television like in the 80s?
I think television in the 80s was pretty great in that we had most people still watching network television on a weekly schedule. They knew what night shows were on. There weren't many DVRs out there, so we could actually steer people to Thursdays at 9 for Cheers or whatever. You know, the schedule was mostly scripted. There were very few reality shows at that point. I mean, if you consider Real People a reality show, I guess that's kind of a reality show. But it wasn't sort of like it wasn't like the Real Housewives done 73 different ways. It was, each show had its own flavor and character, and they're mostly scripted and mostly cast. And hopefully there's a good idea, and hopefully it has a fresh tone to it. So you know, when I went to Fox, for example, you know, I'd just been working on the Cosby Show, so there were these writers I really adored because they had a sick sense of humor, which gives you tone. And they came up with, I begged them to come over because, you know, no one wanted to work at Fox. So I was usually on my knees begging anyone who I wanted to come over. And Ron Levitt and Michael Moy had done shows before which were undeniably had a very sick sensibility to them as comedies. But Ron Levitt says, you know, I want to do Not the Cosbys. I just want to do, I don't like that show. Okay, You know, it's his opinion. So he did it based on his marriage, which was Married with Children. That was, he was Al Bundy and his wife was Peg Bundy, and that's the show they did. And I remember when I got the first script from them, it was a presentation script, but we could make decisions off of it. And it said on the front as the title, "We don't know what to call this." So I still have that script today somewhere. Yeah, I try to keep pilot scripts of like really memorable things that have been around, but it's just a different flavor than, you know, and when you're, you know, Barry had always said you can't put shows on Fox that would work on NBC. We have to do exactly the opposite. We have to put shows that will grab people by the throats and drag them over to an alternative, to usually a UHF channel, because most of the Fox stations were UHF at that point and mattered. We had to be an alternative to those guys. And that was a really hard learning process to me because I'd spent all of my life watching mostly VHF channels and big networks, occasionally watching independent stations running reruns. But thinking outside the box took me some time to really figure out. And what became clear when Married became the biggest show on the network was that that was the only way to go to make this network work. And at that point, you say, okay, I get it. It's got to be, we have to think of ourselves as today's ABC. We're the half a network, which means a lot of the stuff ABC does or did in the 60s and 70s is instructive for us. So ironically, when The Simpsons started coming along as a bumper on Tracy Ullman, and we thought about, oh, maybe we should do this as a full half hour, the precedent for that was not what you would think it would be. It was the Flintstones and the Jetsons on ABC, which were huge hits on ABC, which was half a network in the 60s. And they were family shows, just one in the past and one in the future. And so, I will do one in the present.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
I'm still waiting for Rosie the robot to show up in real life, but I haven't seen her yet.
She's coming. I know you've seen the video from China. It's coming. Let's see here. Okay, great. So you get hired. You got the job. You wake up one morning. I'm all about waking up. You wake up one morning. How you doing with water? Want some water?
No, I'm fine. It's just with the coffee had actual cream in it.
You need more?
No, it's fine. Perfect.
I love cream too. First day of work. I'm in charge of Fox. What do you do?
Well, first of all, no one who runs programming for any company is in charge of the company. You have a team of people above you and a team of people below you, and it's like wrangling all the cats to do their best work. So it's not like Brandon or anyone else who's ever done this makes every decision on their own. It's always a team effort. And you're always convincing, everyone has a boss. You're always convincing your bosses, this is what we should do. Why don't we try that? And of course, they have their own opinions. So you're trying to say, let's not do that one. Maybe try this one instead. And it's, I've heard this story from a number of programmers in my life who have put shows on the air that they've had to really use a little bit of subterfuge with their bosses to get a show on. And people I really respect. I mean, real icons of television. And it always makes me laugh because it's like, oh, you had to sell that through to Bill Paley? And he said yes? Well, he didn't actually say yes. I just put it on the schedule and didn't put anything else on the schedule. And then when he figured it out, it was too late to change it. So that's bravery.
Let me ask you something.
That's how Dukes of Hazzard got on the air, by the way.
Nothing beats Seinfeld's origin story. But let me ask you about that. Like, your green lights have made, I mean, to say they've made billions would be an understatement.
Probably.
Probably. Burying the children alone.
Yeah.
I mean, I know what Ed O'Neill was paid to give up his points. He told me. So if he got that.
By the way, Ed O'Neill was one of the hardest parts to cast because you need someone who has that kind of, you know, grouchy personality, but is a real guy. And that I suggested Ed O'Neill because he had read for an NBC drama pilot to do a version of The French Connection. And we thought, like, okay, yeah, he's a drama actor, but, you know, I think we should give him a shot in this. Katie Sagal was less of a guest. She'd already been in a comedy. But this was like, let's give it a shot.
But what I'm trying to ask you is, like, you knew to hire those writers. You grabbed them from Cosby.
No, they weren't. Those writers were not from Cosby.
Where were they?
Ron Levitt and Michael Moy were, I worked with on some less successful shows. Sorry, I'm burping.
Writers.
No, I know, but let me tell you why. They have a sick sensibility, which I like because I have a little bit of a sick sense of humor myself. And they had done shows with performers I liked, like Jason Bateman. Things like, they just have they're smart. And they had done very traditional shows, but done them really well, like the Jeffersons. Ron Levitt told me the longest laugh he ever had on a show, his entire career, he's since passed away, was George Jefferson's dog sitting on the Jeffersons. He's playing with the dog in the apartment in the sky. He's bouncing the ball around, and then the ball, of course, goes over the balcony edge, and the dog goes after it. Okay. Now, of course, the dog sees the studio floor on the other side, so it's not a big deal. The studio audience totally gets that this is like, oh my God, the dog's dropped 20 stories and is dead on the sidewalk. And the laugh spread was so long they had to actually cut it way down to make it sound believable on television. So no, but when people think like that, you go, okay. It's like Jim Brooks. Jim Brooks, who really is the guy who makes The Simpsons work, or certainly in the beginning made it work, and I still think to this day makes it work. Jim Brooks started making TV shows back during Room 222, through the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and all the spin-offs of Mary Tyler Moore, and through Taxi, and that's how I got to know him, actually. I got to know him, fortunately for me, because I was the program executive assigned to Taxi. So, you know, part of the job is begging the best people to work for you. And the other thing is having some relationship with them going back a long time and saying, you know what, this guy, he's done everything. He will do something unique and it will work.
Beautiful. That was actually perfect. So talk to me, what was it like working at the quote unquote, and tell me what this expression means as well, if you don't mind, the Coat Hanger Network.
The Coat Hanger Network. Well, if you recall, UHF stations could not be received by the same rabbit ear antennas. They're different frequencies, they're higher. So we used to remember those round ring antennas. Those were coat hanger antennas. And, you know, believe me, before I left NBC, I got quite a bit of talking to from both Grant Tinker and Brandon Tartikoff saying, you know, you're about to start a network on all these UHF stations. They're UHF. They're like above 13. I'm going, yes, I know that. There are a couple VHFs, but right, you're used to running a network where we have a lot of VHF stations. These are UHF stations, as if this was some ungodly evil. And but I remember, you know, them saying, I mean, Grant actually had the best line of all time, which is, there'll never be a fourth column on this scheduling board. So when I got to Fox, of course, the first thing we did was make a magnetic scheduling board with 4 columns.
Do you think the other 3 networks ever added a 4th column?
I'm sure they have today.
I mean, I'm sure they did during your reign. I mean,
Well, I don't know. I wasn't there. It's hard for me to know.
No, but of course they did. I mean, how could they?
I know, but
By the time Married with Children and Simpsons and everything else is hitting, how could they not? How could they not be paying attention to what you're doing?
No, they obviously had to it for a while, but when you're Grant Tinker, and Grant Tinker was also an icon in this industry. When you're Grant Tinker and all the executives around you were some, the first woman executive in television, Ethel Wynant, who cast Twilight Zone, and Perry Lafferty, who directed all these shows. All the senior executives at NBC were television icons at that point. And you're learning from all of them different things. And, when he says to you, you're about to go work on UHF stations, you listen.
I guess, and I fully admit, I'm trying to lead the witness, right? Here's what I want from you.
Yeah, okay.
If you don't want to do it,
no, just, okay, but let's see.
I'm trying to get a short bite from you, because it's really, I always try and find these tight little stories that say a huge thing. And what I'd love for you to say in your own words, if it's true, and if you want to,
all right,
is the best thing I ever heard was Grant said, there will never be a 4th column on our tracking boards. And by the end of my career, I can assure you, everybody had Fox on their tracking boards.
Well, it's a scheduling board, not a tracking
board. Sorry.
It's not a tracking board. It's basically an explosion of what we do. We have something called squares that give you every day of the week and what you're scheduling, and they're mostly handwritten back then. And, probably my favorite quote to try to dissuade me from going to this new job was Grant Tinker saying, I can assure you there'll never be a 4th column on that scheduling board where we move the magnets around. And certainly within a few years, everyone had a 4th column on their scheduling board.
Thank you. Fucking great. Fucking great. Thank you. What was the method to the madness of curating all the programs? I mean, like all of your mentors joined companies that were already up and running. Now you're joining a company that you're seeing something none of them saw.
Well,
starting with a blank slate, literally.
Yeah, you're starting with a blank slate whenever you start a network, or you're starting with a blank slate even when you go to a small cable network that has nothing good on it. You are trying to figure out the.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit. Yes, you can go to a new network with shitty shows, but they have infrastructure. They have staff. They have pencils with the name of the company. Unless I'm mistaken, you guys had nothing. Like nothing.
No, we had nothing.
Yeah.
We had
so
nothing.
You're not being fair to yourself.
Okay.
So that's what I'm asking.
Okay, so that would not be a cable, because I didn't start any cable networks. I only started broadcast networks.
So you worked for some of the legends that people will be writing about for the next 1,000 years, as they will you, but unlike them that were standing on other people's shoulders, yes, there was your team and all that, but everyone else that came after you was on your shoulders. So talk to me about that period where you walk in and there's nothing.
Well, I can only compare starting a network to what a writer faces when they stare at a blank piece of paper. It's a blank piece of paper. You have to figure out what that network is about. What's the personality of that network? And it's never the same. In the case of Fox, we didn't quite know what we'd be until we started making shows and seeing what worked. So we became the bad boys of television. The same team went over to WB to start WB, and there we were doing the teenage girl network, with Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Seventh Heaven and Smallville. It just depends what the times are calling for. Fox had that niche. We couldn't do it again. So we decided to go a whole different way, even though it was the same people.
So you just said something very interesting. What do you mean? What does it mean when you say what the times were calling for? And how do you figure it out?
I don't think you can figure it out in advance. I think you have to just you have to make educated guesses. I mean, WB didn't start out the way it evolved quickly into more of a teenage female network. I mean, it started out with the Wayans Brothers show. It started out with some other shows that didn't really fit the model later on. They fit part of the model because we did Steve Harvey, we did Jamie Foxx, but the sort of the teen angst, the Dawson's Creeks of the world, were not on the early schedules. We didn't develop in that area, or the Felicities.
So you would see things from your original green lights that would tell you, do more of this, do less of that.
Correct.
Do more.
Yes.
Would you tell that to me in your own words?
Yeah. This is whenever you start any kind of network, you are constantly iterating. You are seeing what's working, and you and your team are trying to amplify your successes and not make that same mistake again. So you'll see when you start a network, you'll take some guesses, and by the way, the slower you start, the better, because the less failure, and you'll iterate on things you see working. So, if you see Dawson's Creek working, well, then you kind of have a whole lane to yourself from Gilmore Girls to everything else. So it's an iterative process. And they both went through this. Both Fox and WB went through this. And I think it's the only way to do it. How else would you do it? You're focus grouping the entire American public, and they're telling you, we want more of this, we want less of that.
That's absolutely beautiful. Thank you. So what was? Oh, never mind. We already got that. Beautiful. We're doing great. You good with water or coffee? You all right?
Yeah, I'm okay.
All right. So we got that. Oh, we're crushing it here. All right, so let me ask you this. I've been reading about this my whole life. Barry Diller pits his executives against each other. Is that true?
I would say I wouldn't say all, but most bosses pit their executives against each other. I don't think that's unique to Barry. I think it's very common because it creates competition. It's probably a good thing. It's just not fun for the people who are involved in the game. But once you understand what the game is, then you know that everyone gets better under that, in that kind of situation.
I know you already answered this, but I'm still going to ask you. What's the game?
To make the best shows possible and to make the company more successful and more viable and with more viewers.
Here's what I thought you meant by the game.
Okay.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Okay.
And tell me if I'm right or I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I've never been a buyer. I've been a seller my entire career. This is what I've always thought is so interesting for buyers. You're a regular human. You have a house. You have a mortgage. You have kids. You have a wife. You have family. You have all these things, medical bill, all this stuff that a plumber has, a pilot has. Everybody has the same stuff you have. But almost every other job, these things are done. If you work at Boeing, you're probably not the person who greenlights the 747. You might be the person designing it. But as a greenlighter, the jobs you held, you were kind of risking your future every green light.
Yes, I would actually say being a buyer is a tremendously difficult position to be in. And I think most people don't really appreciate that because every decision you make is on a scorecard. And 5 outs, you're gone. The challenge with being a programmer is you're not making the shows. You're saying, you make a show, I think that idea is good enough, I think you can do it, we'll give you as much help as we can. But the fact is executives are not in there writing the show at 2 o'clock in the morning and doing rewrites. At most, if a show's in trouble, I have been known to show up in the editing room night before air to fix the first act of a show because I happen to know how to edit. But and I know how important it is that the first 10 minutes of a show be great. But that's not what we do. We're placing our bets on other people. So we can do what we can. We can market it correctly. We can try to steer people around something we see coming that's not necessarily a good thing. We have to endure that, all creative people have tempers and moodiness and all this stuff. So, I've learned my life to be to be yelled at. Yelled at by producers mostly. Like, what? Okay, no, just calm. But you're hiring someone to do something, and you need to give them gentle guidance and support.
Beautiful. Let's see here. So, what was the ultimate impact of Barry Diller on Fox? Is there a Fox without Barry Diller?
I don't think so.
Say that back to me if you don't mind.
I don't think there would be a Fox broadcasting without Barry Diller, because his imprint's all over the company in terms of his scripted knowledge and his knowledge of television. There were things that Rupert contributed as well. Rupert contributed his knowledge of television from Australia when he did A Current Affair, and he did a lot of the shows that were more reality-based, America's Most Wanted, things like that. And then there were things where we all chimed in, Cops. That was kind of like, oh, cameras are small now. We don't have to stage this with actors. We can do what Jack Webb did on the Dragnet series. We can instead of putting writers in the back seat to figure out the great stories, we can actually just put videographers back there and take all that accumulated footage and tell a story from all the camcorders out there running. So it's always a combination of different people's personalities and interests.
Beautiful. And then my last question before I turn this over to my better half.
Okay.
Knowing what you know now, looking back, again, I don't think it's deniable. You've greenlit billion-dollar franchises that are generating money today, and Simpsons is in production. That's easy. Married with Children hasn't been in production for 2 decades, making money right now as we sit here. How does that feel to you, in a good way, in a bad way? And again, maybe it's all good, maybe it's all bad. Tell me your opinion. But on the one hand, you, to a certain degree, I know you didn't cure cancer, but you've affected civilization. I mean, you've created things that change careers, a joke that may have led to a marriage or a divorce. You affected culture. But on the other hand, I'm assuming you're not a billionaire.
No, so, definitely not.
So what is it like?
Barry is, though.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. So what is it like for you to sit here in 2022, again, unlike that engineer at Boeing, that literally no one has died in millions of flights because of a part he or she invented, but no one knows what that part is. You invented things just like that engineer, or you caused things to exist that wouldn't have without you. As you said, Barry's a billionaire, you're not. What's the good and bad looking back on that from 2022?
Well, at the end of the day, I'm a creative programmer. And I hire other people to make shows. And sometimes I make them. I did the Ricky Lake show, as you know. I think you have to keep evolving with the times. So what I look at now is I go, okay, linear network television, linear broadcast television, linear cable television is pretty much a declining medium. It's been fascinating to watch the streamers come on board, experiment with, are we going to drop all of our episodes at once? Are we going to go once a week? What makes a streaming series better than a broadcast series? Not just money. It may be that there's only 8 episodes instead of 22 or 24 like we used to make. So I'm always thinking, like, what are the interesting little things I'm hearing from friends and colleagues about the future? For example, a few years ago, putting aside streaming for 1 second, a few years ago, one of my young colleagues at one of the companies I was working with as a consultant said he started bringing up podcasting. And I go, like, what is, I didn't really know what podcasting was. And she's saying, well, there's, Richard Simmons is missing in the Valley. And there's this thing called Serial that tells these true crime stories. I'm going, huh. And so, that's a change, because that entire a younger generation is all into podcasting. And to the older ones of us who started radio, that's sort of radio, but it's not. It's when you really start digging into it, it's very different from radio. And so you start exploring in that. That's actually one of the things I'm doing now. On digital, I've been very involved in digital the last 10 years. I worked with Barry on Vimeo, which is a digital service that very interesting in terms of the ability to reach everyone in the world with great quality video. And now the question is, how do you get good video on there? How do you compete with other people? How do you create projects that will pencil through in terms of P&L? And I think what you're seeing now is also a fascinating time, because now it started with Netflix. I was at Warner Brothers when they didn't want to sell anything to Netflix. And then they started selling things to Netflix, and then Netflix wanted more and more and more. And finally, they woke up one day, and this was predicted by a lot of very smart executives. They basically said, no, we want it all. And these executives who had always felt they had control of their destiny lost it. And that's when they all started starting their own streaming services while still running their linear services. And there was a massive consolidation, because Netflix had been taking all the best stuff from the creative community, overpaying for it, and not necessarily always getting the best stuff, but doing a good job. And now you see, you know what? HBO Max does a good job developing shows. Yeah, Casey Bloys, something's going on over there. Netflix, I'm not sure, maybe they should not drop all their episodes at once. Maybe they should go to like the Apple Plus model, where they make less shows, but they're a little more crafted. Or you can do extensions of your broadcast shows like Peacock, or you can do what Paramount's doing with Paramount Plus. There's a lot of different interesting changes going on, and I'm fascinated by the interplay of personalities and formats and identities of each of these services. And I don't think we've seen the end of that shift yet. I think we're right in the middle of it.
I was 2 hours ago at a breakfast making a joke about how Netflix, the guy kept saying Netflix, and I kept saying, oh, you mean Apple Plus? And he's like, no, Netflix. You mean Apple Plus?
Well, this is actually a big challenge. Look, I did not want to be too harsh on Netflix since you're doing this for Netflix, but the challenge for Netflix is, and I don't know if they understand the challenge. I understand the challenge, and my colleagues understand the challenge. The challenge for Netflix is they're making too much stuff without a tight enough filter. They're very bad, the worst, at marketing and promoting shows and then getting you to watch them and become addicted to them and loving them. They have this, and I think it went from a fairly small company, of which I knew a lot of the people, to just this massive thing where every tiny little slice of the programming market is covered by a different team. And a lot of the people, sometimes it's better to have people who know comedy, drama, reality and all that stuff, who can all together figure out, how do we make this better? How do we focus this part of our service? How do we get people to discover shows? How do we market to them? Because half the shows that go up on Netflix, most people never have heard of.
understatement of the millennium. Garth, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Hope I wasn't too long-winded.
No, I hope I wasn't too long-winded because
No, this is, I knew it would be like this from our limited experience.
From your
in the
little
past.
experience with Earthquake?
Oh, greatest quote ever. Garth, thank you very much.
Sure.
Can I bring you anything? You all right?
I'm just going to keep sipping this terrible coffee.
All right.
Do you want a bathroom break?
Sure, let's do that.
Let's do that, right? Where you got your mic? I was just curious about the whole Joan Rivers thing.
Oh, God, do I know that story.
I mean, it's true Carson was blocking her from getting guests, right? Is that what happened?
Carson had complete control over everyone else's guests. That's how important Johnny Carson was to the network. So when David Letterman was on at 12:30, you may recall, all the guests were approved by Johnny. So, look, he'd earned that. He was the king of late night. And if Johnny Carson wanted to block guests from going on those other shows first, he could. Because that's how important the show was to the company.
Nobody's that powerful now, right?
No, not really. Not now.
Yeah.
I mean, what I watch in late night now. I mean, I mostly watch Stephen Colbert, and then I watch Seth Meyers because I love the writing, and that's kind of my cup of tea. And I watch Trevor Noah, even though it gets a little corny sometimes. He's much better with the studio audience back in place. Watch Jimmy Kimmel monologue. You cannot make me watch The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. I just feel like it's like catering to idiots, and I don't want to be an idiot.
You love TV, don't you?
I watch a lot of TV, still do. Still watch a lot of TV.
That's interesting because you're running off that list, and I used to watch all those shows, and I don't anymore.
I watch a lot of TV, and I don't even have cable anymore. It's all IP.
Oh yeah, I mean I get everything through a Fire Stick, I think.
Yeah, mine's all through Apple TVs.
Yeah.
But I do love it. I mean, the problem is there just are not that many shows on network television that get me excited creatively.
On network television?
On network television. I mean, partially because I hate commercials.
Yeah, of course.
And I think it's insane that the networks have not figured out a way to lower their commercial loads. Because I'm on boards of companies that do interactive advertising, and we can take the ad load of a show way down just by saying you get this commercial, you get that commercial, based on what we know about you. And that's going to only get bigger because when ATSC 3.0 actually gets traction here, which is it's already up and running, but it's not enough TVs are yet using it. The company I'm on the board of is doing all the insertable advertising over the air for Nine Australia. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to find. I called the people who invented it and said, "How does this work? How are you sending hundreds of versions of commercials to insert in the show at certain times?" And now I understand it.
So you're talking about targeted commercials per viewer, right? I mean,
yes,
yeah.
So
you're talking
about not per viewer, but you can make the company makes sometimes 1,000 versions of a commercial.
That's crazy.
Because it says like, "Hey Joe in Orlando, we've got Mission Impossible 2 or 8 coming out this weekend. Your local theater is here. You can put your phone up to the screen to get tickets. Here are the show times," and it will use the QR code and let you buy the tickets from your TV set.
So speaking of Tom Cruise, it's literally like the commercials in Minority Report.
Yeah, basically, yes. Except now it's real.
Yeah.
Let's hope it doesn't turn out the way like Minority Report turned out.
All right, let's get back on track.
Okay.
I suspect I know what you're going to answer this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Sure.
There's a quote from someone that actually my research here doesn't have that said, the former Fox exec, unnamed, I'm assuming it's not you, says, "The reality is that there were not many ideas that came out of Barry Diller's head. There wasn't one show on our air that Barry dreamt up. He's been dramatically overpaid, but that's the way Hollywood is with people like Barry Diller."
Well, certainly wouldn't be me saying that. because
Sure.
I think what Barry's job is to be a great editor, not a great generator of ideas. Because, a lot of people can generate a lot of ideas. They can be terrible. The editor has to make sure the good ones get through him. And so the lesson I learned from Barry is not to expect him to come up with the ideas, but to filter and be really tough on myself about what I presented to him.
Great, thank you. You mentioned this before, but you were assigned to Taxi, and that's how you met Brooks.
Yes.
Tell me about Jim Brooks as a person.
Just very decent, honorable guy.
Sorry, let me interrupt you. Please use names when you're giving me answers.
Oh,
Remember,
I'm sorry.
I'm going to be edited out, so we need to hear the name from you.
Well, Jim Brooks is a television industry and movie industry icon, and his hand has been involved in some of the most iconic shows of all time. So, of course, if you're starting a network, the first person you want to go beg to do a show is Jim Brooks. And he happened to be on the Fox lot when we were starting Fox, so I was, I would have crawled over broken glass to him to make a show.
Well, how did you get him? Because...
I didn't crawl over broken glass.
Okay.
I was just a decent person who he knew was a decent person because I had known him from Taxi, and I remember talking to him about when he was rehearsing Terms of Endearment, which he rehearsed in his living room, and thinking, oh God, I'm talking to the guy who created the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and he's working with Jack Nicholson and blocking the scenes in his house with tape on the floor. This is like incredible. And then when I saw the movie, I thought, not only is this really well written and cast, but his direction is extraordinary because if you think about direction, it's dialogue and physical language, body language. And Jim is one of the few people who actually understands that they both have to run side by side. So when he's directing, I can see it.
Going back...
He also has a laugh that you can hear on any laugh track.
Oh, it's so funny. Who was I just talking to?
You believe me, you know it's on every show he's ever worked on.
Yeah.
It sounds like
Wait, hold on. Now it's stressing my mind. Oh, Rich Moore. I was just talking to Rich Moore, and he said when he met him and heard him laugh in person, he was like, "Oh my God, that's the laugh from all the shows I always watch." Like,
that's absolutely true.
Okay.
You can hear it on the Mary Tyler Moore soundtrack.
That's funny. I was going to ask you. You described to Brian what television was like in the '80s in the United States, very different than now. With regards to Jim Brooks, I wonder if you could tell us what an odd bird he was back then, in the sense that it's gone now, but there used to be this great big wall between TV and movies, right?
Yes.
So he was an unusual figure, and I guess it's because he did TV first, then went to movies, and came back, right?
Yeah, there used to be a bigger wall there. I know that he had a hard time getting movies made early on because he was a TV icon, but he wasn't a movie icon. But I think it was his second movie. He did one movie before it that wasn't a big hit. But then his second movie was Terms of Endearment, and Terms of Endearment won 3 Oscars: Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Screenplay, I think. And it was like, whoa, okay, he hardly got that made. In fact, I happen to know that the way it got made, I'm taking this from Brandon Tartikoff, who's no longer with us, is that they were $1 million short to get the green light from Paramount. And Brandon agreed to buy the movie for NBC, and by putting that $1 million on the table, and that's what got the green light.
So pre-sale got them to the budget.
Well, think about how great a move that is. Brandon Tartikoff really moved the dial to get people to say yes, go to a movie by Jim Brooks with Shirley MacLaine, Jack Nicholson, all these people. Jack Nicholson only agreed to do 2 weeks. Then he did the whole movie because he liked it. I mean, it really was serendipitous, and I remember him talking about when he was rehearsing, and it was like, oh, this sounds really interesting.
Broadcast news came out after Simpsons started?
Broadcast news. What year broadcast news?
You know what, we're sitting here straining our memories, and I'm like, I have this.
Yeah, I think you have the device. You can just look.
Yeah.
It came out in '87, so it would have been during the Tracy Ullman show.
So yes, before because we didn't get the Simpsons pilot back from Korea until late 1989. That was one of the most frustrating things about the Simpsons is you have to buy 13 episodes or you can't make a show. It's not like a pilot situation. You have to make the show, send them to Korea, and then when the animation comes back, then you've committed.
All right, we're going to get to all this. Hold on a second. Yeah. So tell me about, let's get to Tracy Ullman show finally. And Garth, what's your timetable like today? Because I want to know.
Yeah, it was fine.
Okay. Tracy Ullman show, tell me about that. How does that come about? That's the result of, you get Jim to come over because he knew you. You would have crawled on glass even though he didn't make you. Right?
He didn't make me crawl on glass, but yes, he came over and he wanted to do a show about Tracy Ullman. I mean, look, I'm crawling on broken glass figuratively. He wants to make a sketch show with Tracy Ullman doing all these different characters. And so you say yes to him, of course.
And that was because he's Jim Brooks.
Yes.
Was that also because, was that part of Fox? You guys were just trying to get this thing going, right? So you're trying unusual things, right?
Yeah, but also you're never going to succeed if you're working with only people who've never proven themselves before. And you know, of all the people who were at Fox to start with, there was no one more proven than Jim. I mean, we had some great people, Stephen Cannell and Levitt and Moy, but you know, Stephen Cannell did 21 Jump Street. I mean, there were people who had done other stuff, but you know, not with the history of Jim Brooks.
So that didn't strike you as strange. You're like, yeah, let's do a variety show. But did you know who Tracy Ullman was?
Yeah.
You did.
Yeah, she had done HBO specials before, and you know, she's been kicking around a long time.
So that show gets up and running.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that show gets critical success, but never really takes off, right?
That's true.
Sorry, I need you to say it on camera.
I'm sorry. The show was a critical success. Great cast. Never quite took off. But something amazing came out of it, which is that the producers of the show came and said, we'd like to do bumpers on the show, animated bumpers. And the deal was we would do 1 minute of animated bumpers per week and split them up between the breaks on the show to tell a complete story over 1 minute. And I will tell you, there were people in corporate at Fox who wanted us to kill these because it cost $15,000 a week to make the animated bumpers. I go like, okay. And I had the argument. I go like, no, we're not killing the animated bumpers. You know, they're onto something here. I don't know what it is, but they're onto something. And actually, even the Simpsons were not even the first animated bumper. There was one before that, but the Simpsons was obviously by far the most successful. And then from that, you could see, oh, we could actually do a whole half-hour show telling the story like this, much more, in a more contemporary version of the Flintstones or the Jetsons.
Who, when you said they came to the producers on the show, who came to you? Is that Ken Eston? Is that who's?
Which part?
Who comes to you and says we want to do these animated shorts?
The person who came to me with the animated shorts was Richard Sakai, who I'm sure you're talking to. I hope.
Yeah. And actually, my next question. Let's go there. I was going to ask you the same way I asked you about Jim Brooks. Tell me about Richard Sakai.
Richard is like one of those creative producers who just is like, at that point, it was Jim's right-hand creative producer. He wasn't a writer. He's not like, well, Matt was just an animation guy who did, Life is Hell, all those books which we tried to use, and the publisher wouldn't let us use those. But Life is Hell, Love is Hell. Do you remember any of those?
No, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay.
Life in Hell. But the story is that he didn't want to give you guys the rights. Is that
No,
true?
no, the publisher did not want to. I think it was probably a combination. What I was told is the publisher didn't want to do it. They probably didn't want to split any kind of royalties with the publisher of these very esoteric books. And so the lore goes that Matt Groening went home and wrote on the back of it, came up with these characters on the back of a napkin or something like that. And then that's what they presented. And the characters were fully owned by the show and by Matt.
Excellent. I sidetracked you all. You tell me about Richard Sakai, because he's instrumental in the history of Simpsons.
He is. Richard, first of all, he was helpful. I knew him also from Taxi. He was helpful in convincing Jim to do this, as a go-between. He was
And convincing Jim to come to Fox?
come to Fox Broadcasting. He was already at Fox Studios for TV, for movies. Sorry, he wasn't doing any other TV. And Richard, all these personalities around Jim. I think it was Sam Simon. Was Ken Eston involved or no? I don't.
Ken Eston was on Omen shows, my understanding, right?
I know Sam Simon was on Simpsons before he, obviously passed away he had cancer.
Sure. Sam Simon was involved from the beginning too, is my understanding. And obviously, he's the one who assembled the writers' room once you guys went to see,
Yeah, well, no, well, here's what you need to know and why I'm a little confused.
Go ahead.
Eston and Simon were a writing team forever. They did a lot of major projects together, and Eston and Simon were like hugely well known in the comedy writing community. But I guess when we got to Simpsons, it was Sam, Matt, and Jim who really put the pieces together, and then they built a team under them that could make the show every week.
Yeah, that's exactly my understanding. Those are the three, basically.
Yeah.
And then with Richard Sakai sort of as the fourth person always involved.
Well, he's always involved. I mean, he was, as crazy as it sounds, like there are things that Richard would do. Like he came up with that whole thing at the end where someone goes, shh, and when they're screening the little Gracie Films thing at the end. Little known fact is I'm the person who goes, shh.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, that's cool.
I thought, let me go down in history as being the shush guy in the sound
I'm glad you
booth.
told me that. I would have never thought to ask that.
Yeah, well, why would you?
Yeah.
no one cares. Anyway, yeah.
Well, while we're on the subject of Richard, I've done a great deal of research and reading about this stuff.
Yeah.
Richard does not have the greatest reputation. You read about him and people say he's like Jim Brooks is like Hatchet Man. He's the guy who does all the tough stuff that Jim doesn't want to do, and therefore a lot of people feel crossed by him. But what's your take? That's just stuff I read online.
Okay, well, I have never experienced that side of him. But then again, if you're Jim Brooks, wouldn't you want to have somebody who makes you look great all the time?
Sure. And also your position, you're not going to receive that. You're not on the receiving end.
I'm not on the receiving end of any of that. No.
Yeah, exactly.
Believe me, I was on the receiving end of that from lots of other people, but not,
not from Gracie Films.
Not from, never from Gracie Films.
Is Rob Canale somebody you worked with?
Yes.
He is, right?
Yes.
What can you tell me about Rob?
Rob came in.
And full disclosure, I'm asking because he's already sat here and done an interview.
I forget when Rob came in. He came in. I just had lunch with Rob a couple weeks ago, and obviously he's a very successful agent in the SVOD space now. Represents a lot of writers, including some friends of mine. He was in the program department. I don't remember exactly who did what, when. I do on certain shows and not on other shows. Like, I had wanted to do it in living color and I couldn't find somebody who had the sensibility of it. And there was one of our executives was Charles Hirschhorn, who said, I think I found the guy, and dragged me down to a screening room in the basement of the old Fox executive building and showed me a reel of I'm Gonna Get Your Sucker. And I said, this is a sketch movie. There's no story, but it's funny. So, Rob was in the program department, a senior person in the program department.
Let's go back to those interstitials. So you defied the people who wanted to kill them, it sounds like, right?
Yes.
And you did that because they had shown you something, or because it was something Jim Brooks wanted?
No, because it wasn't. I never asked Jim about it. I like the interstitials, and I always think like if there's a seed of anything there, you should keep doing it until it figures itself out.
You mentioned there was another one. Those were the ones by based on M.K. Brown's Doctor, right? There was like a Doctor something.
Ignatu, Dr. Ignatu, is that what it was? Yeah, there was one before. I barely remember those though, because they only did them for like a certain number of weeks. And then this was the second one.
Got it. And then this is obviously the one that caught on, right? It became.
I mean, it wasn't popular. It wasn't a sensation popular. I mean, when you have a 10-second, 15-second clip going into a break, it's not a breakout hit situation. You're looking for seeds of what this might become later, and that turned out to be a really well spent $15,000 an episode.
Yeah, in retrospect. Yeah.
In retrospect.
Is it true that Tracy Ullman didn't like them? That she wasn't crazy about them?
I don't know, never talked to Tracy about it.
Okay, I just read that she thought they were kind of crude, and then is this true? You tell me. They started stringing them together and playing them for the studio audience before the show, before the tapings, and that they started getting really a lot of laughs there, and that's something that I think Sam Simon was aware of.
I didn't go to a lot of tapings of the show. I mean, if I went to tapings of the show, I'm like on the stage watching the audience react, and I'm not looking at the warm up. That would be part of the warm up for the studio audience. What they did do is once they wanted to see if they could seat it wider before the show started, and they put it on top of the movie like a Looney Tunes cartoon from Fox Studios. And that really helped grease the wheels for what.
They put it at the head of the movies?
They put it on top of a feature film in the theaters, yes.
Do you remember what it was?
I don't remember what it was.
Okay, I'm gonna.
Somebody will know this.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to find out what that was.
They took an entire 1 minute thing that told a story from beginning to end. They always did, and they strung them together and put it in front of a movie.
I'll find out what it was put in front of. I watched them all the other day. They were on YouTube. Somebody strung them all together, so you could sit down and just watch them all in a row.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah.
I did not know they were.
Yeah, and it's kind of shocking to see them now. I mean, by the way, I remember I saw it back when you guys were airing them on Ullman Show.
Yeah.
And I sitting here talking to you, I'm like, how did I even know? Because I did not watch the Ullman Show, but for some reason, 15-year-old me or whatever knew to seek these out, and I remember seeing them. But yeah, you can watch them strung together on YouTube, and it's like they're shockingly crude, animation-wise.
Well, the animation in when Fox hit the 25th anniversary of the network, Peter Rice came to me, who was then running the network, and said, we're trying to figure out what to do for the 25th anniversary, and here's what we're thinking, and he was really thinking of some really creative, interesting ideas, like doing new episodes with the cast of original, iconic shows. I said, here's the problem. Johnny Depp is not going to come back and do a 21 Jump Street script. I mean, some of these people are just beyond this, and they look very different. He might now. This week he might.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, your point's taken.
Yeah, the point was taken. At that point, he was not going to do it. Yeah. Anyway. So I said, look, my humble suggestion, just run the pilots of the most iconic shows from the network, and in one night. And just, if you want to do a little interstitial with some of the cast members and stuff, that's fine. Do it with the audience, that's fine. But try to make it achievable, because I think if you start doing fresh episodes of these shows with actors who look much older and are not doing it or no longer with us, it's going to be tough.
That makes sense. So, here's what I read online about this, and then the reason I'm talking to you is because you were there, and you'll tell me what's real.
Okay,
all right.
I'll try.
So, Brooks and Gracie Films apparently were trying to get an order for Simpsons, and were even offered, no, let's just do a special or a holiday special or a one-shot or whatever, and that Brooks and Sakai, I guess, insisted, like, no, we want a 13-episode order or we're not doing it. Is there truth to that? And
Yes.
They played hardball.
Yeah. Yes, and they were right to play hardball. in this for this reason. The idea of doing a pilot or a special went back in animation in those days was a 1-year project. You would not get that film back until a year from then, and then you'd have another year to put it up on the air as a show. So I agreed with Jim to tell a little white lie to our management, which was that ABC had offered 6 episodes. As far as I could tell, they had not. But this was our little white lie for many years. I think Barry knows about it now, but that's what got Barry to order 13.
So wait a minute. I just sat here and listened to you tell me about how great his bullshit meter is. But you lied to him.
It's a white lie. It's a really, in the scheme of things, I mean, yeah, I did. But
actually, you know what? I said it off camera. Can you say in the scheme of things I did lie to Barry? But
I made a little white lie to Barry about ABC's 6-episode order.
So basically, he didn't want to do it.
No, he did want to do it, but he didn't want to do a series order.
Okay, you know what? I can hear the editors yelling at me because this is great. But can you tell this to me, and can you give me kind of like Brian had to do, can you give me a succinct version of like...
Yeah, I got it.
Jim wanted this, Barry only wanted the special, you lied.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
I want to highlight that you lied. No, go ahead.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
That was the point. That was the whole point of was saying, are we going to talk about this or not?
Listen, if the show cost a lot of money and tanked, I think people would be angry. It's
Yeah,
Simpsons.
obviously, yeah. So as The Simpsons started, people started chattering more about The Simpsons, Barry agreed to do a special or a pilot of The Simpsons. The problem with that is you do a pilot, it takes a year to make, and then if you want to do more, you got to come back and it takes another year to do that. Because that's just the nature of animation, especially when you're doing the animation over in Korea. And neither side would budge. I mean, I understood why Jim and Richard wanted to do some episodes. I don't think 13 is a crazy number of episodes for an animated show. And this has always been true of animation. You just don't do a test. You actually go for it. Barry wanted to do the special. Jim wanted to do 13 so that it would pencil out and he could get a staff together and do it the right way. And so we agreed, Jim, Richard, and myself, to tell Barry that ABC wanted to order 6 episodes. Now, that was a white lie, but in fairness, because I do think Barry has an extraordinary bullshit meter, I think he knew it was a lie. And he went along with it anyway, knowing this was a good idea.
That was great. Perfect. Thank you. And I assume Barry can pick up the phone and check.
Yeah, yes.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, I would assume.
Yes.
Okay. So that's great. So wait. So
Yeah, so it's the most profitable show in the history of television, and this is what it comes down to, like a white lie in a meeting. Okay, fine.
That's great. You told the white lie that gave the world Simpsons. That's huge.
It's still a lie.
So semantic.
Okay.
I take it you weren't in the habit of doing that very often.
I don't do that because it's like with Barry, it's very dangerous territory.
Right. If he hadn't wanted to go along with it, you could have been in a bad spot.
Yes. But there are a lot of times what? Sorry.
Can you say that for me? Because I just said it.
Okay. I don't think that Barry would have gone along with it unless he felt somewhere in his bones that this was a good idea. So while it's a lie, I think it's a little white lie.
Perfect.
And on top of, I would call Barry sometimes and say, I've just, Stephen Chow and I just talked about doing this show about cops and squad cars, and he doesn't have the money to make the pilot. and I'll give my budget. I'll give Steven the money to make the pilot for Cops. It's $150,000. I think it's worth it. You go like, oh, that was worth it.
Oh, yeah, that one was definitely worth it. I don't know how it works. So, does Barry have to go to Rupert about Simpsons?
No.
No, it doesn't.
No.
Right?
Barry makes his own decisions. He does not. I mean, if Barry wanted to buy another studio or something major, he would go to Rupert. But otherwise, I don't believe so.
Not to greenlight a show.
No, definitely not, or a movie or anything else. No.
Got it. You said something earlier that I thought was really interesting. I wonder if maybe you could expand on it now. Because primetime animation was not a thing at that point.
It wasn't at that point, but it had been in the past.
Well, that's exactly what I wanted you to expand on. You mentioned earlier that you used to look at what ABC did decades earlier when they were sort of in your position, basically, is what I understood you said.
Yes.
And that's where Jetsons and Flintstones had been primetime animated shows that
and they were, not only were they primetime animated shows on ABC, but...
Sorry, can you say that with the
I'm
titles?
sorry.
No worries. I'm just thinking of the editors.
Yeah, I got it. I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Not only were the Flintstones and the Jetsons successful in the 60s on ABC, which is always considered the half network, but the Flintstones was so popular that for several weeks, ABC was #1 over NBC and CBS. So there was something in this idea or area if you could recreate that magic.
And it's interesting to me that you were thinking of, you knew your TV history and were taking lessons from it.
Yeah, I mean, another one that was like that was I had looked back at TV history and said, like, okay, has there been any sketch show that's worked in the modern history of television? Like Blackout sketch. And the show I kept stumbling upon was Laugh-In. And I thought, well, why don't we do an ethnic Laugh-In? And our working title was Blackout, because they were blackout sketches where they're just very short. Obviously, not a title you can use in television, but then we had to find someone to make Blackout. And that's when our executives went out and tried to find who could do this, and then we pitched the project to that producer. So we after I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker, we pitched the project to Keane Ivory Wayans, and he said yes to a pilot.
Yeah, no, that another good call on your part. Simpsons starts. It's greenlit. The process of animation is like molasses compared to live action television.
Yes.
Right? So.
And even more so then, because there was really no way to speed up the process with any kind of computers or anything else. It was really hand-drawn animation.
And this was pretty homegrown. Like, you guys pulled the voice talent straight out of Ullman Show, right?
Well, why do you think that is?
For cheapness.
Well, yeah, for The Simpsons, we pulled the voice talent out of the cast of the Tracy Ullman Show, because that way there wouldn't be a second set of residuals to have to pay.
Nicely done. Although, wasn't Simpsons is non-union, right, for like the first decade? I know all the animators told me they were all working non-union.
Maybe the animators were, but not the show was WGA and all that. I mean, and the actors certainly are SAG. I mean, so they would get paid. Those are not people who are not honoring union contracts.
Got it. Were you involved with the selection of Klasky Chupo as the animating house?
No, that was Richard Sakai.
That was Richard. Okay, so what I hear about the famous story is that when the first episode comes back, they go through the whole development. It's like a 6-month process, right? It goes to South Korea. Which, by the way, why South Korea?
It's a great question. It's a better question for Richard, because what do I know about people hand-drawing animated cartoons in South Korea? I don't know.
I just wonder, because my understanding is these things are still done in South Korea to this day.
I don't even know that.
Yeah.
I mean, all I can tell you is when you've done some animated shows, you understand why Parker and Stone do South Park with cardboard cutouts, because you can make the show in 5 seconds with stop animation, whereas Simpsons actually, yes, the characters are crude, but they're not they're not cardboard cutouts where the mouths are moving like two pieces of cardboard.
No, listen, I've been interviewing a lot of the animators who worked on the show, and just listening to it's an excruciatingly slow process to make one episode.
Yes.
So,
but there's a good side to that as well, which is if you do a traditional sitcom, you have to build the sets. You have usually no more than, I don't know, 10 scenes in a half hour because you're limited by time and space. There's only, you can't build sets that don't exist. In animation, you don't have to build a set. The set is a piece of paper or a cell that's drawn that you put behind people. So you could be in Tokyo 1 second and be in Burbank the next. It's pretty amazing, and it allowed them to do way more scenes a show than a traditional sitcom.
You just reminded me of something you said earlier, which I thought was fantastic, where you used the analogy of starting a network as a writer staring at a blank page. That was great. This is what I was going to ask you. So the story that you read is that this first episode comes back, they have a screening, Jim Brooks sits through it and says, this looks like shit, and that episode does not end up being the first episode. That episode was directed by Kent Butterworth. Kent Butterworth does not direct more of them. What do you know about that? Where were you?
At that point, I was over at Disney. So
you had left
I had
already.
just left. So I was president of Disney Television at that point.
Wait a minute, give me the exact timeline.
We bought the show in either December or January of 1988. And then, but knowing we would not get it till the following Christmas. So, yeah, I wasn't there for it.
You bailed. How long were you at Fox altogether?
About 3.5 years. Because remember, we had to ramp up the network. We started in late night with Joan Rivers, all that stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that went on in between.
I'm just curious, why no desire to stay there and see this Fox grow further? I mean, tell me, or you just got a great offer?
No, it was really it was one of those burnout situations. I'm always sympathetic when I hear. I'm always somewhat sympathetic, I should say, when I hear people get burned out in a certain role, and I had just figured out how it worked, but I felt burned out by it, and so that's when I went to Disney, and then I went back to Fox right afterwards.
Oh, how long were you at Disney?
2 years.
2 years. Okay. You like to move, I think.
Yeah. I did some stuff at Disney. We did Home Improvement. We did
some stuff.
Home Improvement, the magical, wonderful, colorful world of Disney.
With Eisner hosting, right?
With Michael hosting.
I remember those.
Yeah, Michael had some that was really actually surreal.
That's a whole other thing I could interview you about. Let me just see that we're hitting everything here. Harris Kettleman.
Yes.
Tell me about Harris and his role in all this.
Harris was the president of 20th Television. Still know him today. He was mostly supportive of the whole thing, along with John Dolgen, who was his boss. The challenge for any studio head when you're starting a network is, and we went through exactly the same thing at Warner Brothers that we went through at Fox. At some point, the studio has to separate itself from the network because other buyers won't buy from the studio that feels like it's beholden to one network. So all the early shows on the WB, for example, were made by other studios. Mm-hmm. And so, and in fact, 20th Television didn't want to make In Living Color. So that's why I think HBO Signature made the In Living Color with 20th. So a lot of times you're splitting the baby for optical reasons, so that Harris can credibly say, not all my shows are going to Fox Broadcasting. And by the way, when you're a brand new network, it's very reasonable for a studio chief to say, I don't want to peg my future and my bonuses and all my creative talent to one network, and especially a startup at that.
Right. I mean, was there a time when you thought Fox might not go the distance?
I think there's always a time you think it's not going to go the distance. I mean, when WB started, we didn't know. There was a very well-funded opponent, which was UPN, and way further ahead. And we had to do everything we did at Fox in half the time.
That's interesting because I've interviewed Lucy Salhaney about that, and she was. That sounds like that was doomed from the beginning, actually.
Well,
in retrospect.
Okay, well, so here's the Lucy Salhaney story for you. I did a programming retreat before we started with our team. Took them to Palm Springs, went through the history of television and said, okay, TV is changing. Shows that weren't big enough to work in the big days of network television, we should look back on if they're strong genres. And we came out of that meeting saying, you know what? There was this show called Star Trek. It was canceled once by NBC. They got 250,000 letters. They brought it back. It was canceled again by NBC. It's still running today because there's a hardcore Trekkie audience. So we spoke with John Pike, who was president of Paramount Television at the time, and John said, well, there is a Star Trek thing we kind of been toying with, but we'll never get it on the air. It's like basically the Star Trek, the next group of people, basically. Basically, he was saying Star Trek, the next generation, right? So we sit down with Frank Mancuso and Lucy and John and Barry Diller and Jamie Kellner, and we make a deal to make 13 episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation for Sunday at 7 on Fox. And during that negotiation, somehow, I'm not quite sure exactly how this came out, but at some point, Lucy said, why are we making this for... First of all, they shopped it to all the other networks. No one wanted it. Mm-hmm. So we were alone in that bidding. But then Lucy says, and Lucy has a background in syndication, she says, why are we making this for someone else? We should be making it for ourselves. It's our studio IP, and we'll fund it. And she makes it for First Run syndication. And the irony of that is, when they start UPN, the signature show that's going to start the network is another Star Trek, Star Trek Voyager. I think, like, I'm a Trekkie, so I'm following all this, going like, every time I want to make a Star Trek, these people get in the way.
Well, wait a minute. I'm fascinated by this, and we're off topic. You don't know this, but we spent last year doing an 11-episode series about the history of Star Trek. Okay. So I wish I had spoken to you then.
Well, you wouldn't have done this. It's like something that literally fell apart after our lunch and deal on Handshake.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. How did they unravel? How did they back? I mean, they screwed you. They backed out on you guys after you guys had a deal?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Does that happen often?
No. It's like the one, it's the only time. So I mean, I don't hold it against Lucy really, but a little bit.
I mean, aren't there legal ramifications to this?
No, because it's a handshake deal. I mean,
Still.
It's not papered.
Listen, I used to be an agent. And I made deals with people, forget a handshake deal, just on the phone.
No,
we papered it, and that's like...
It was very unusual. It was very unusual, and I was very upset about it. Because now I go like, I have to go back to the drawing board with my team for Sunday at 7, because that would have been, Sunday at 7 would have been a great place for Star Trek: The Next Generation. But we had to do something else, and that forced us to work on Jump Street.
Yeah, and then they went off with that syndicated model, which actually worked out.
It worked out fine for them.
Yeah.
Worked out fine. I mean, not for us. It would have been a bigger hit on Fox than in syndication.
I'm wondering. I'm wondering if there's some way to retroactively add this to the show. Well, anyway.
I mean, there's a little more to the story that I know about, but I can't. There was a personality conflict at the highest levels.
This was a Roddenberry problem?
No, I think Gene was not even alive.
No, he was.
He was?
Yeah. He lived till 1991.
Oh, he was never in the meetings.
But you know what? Now I'm thinking about it. This version of the show, I think, was something John Pike was doing without him. And then when this didn't happen, they brought Roddenberry back for what ended up being Star Trek: Next Generation in syndication. So you would have been the show, I think, done without Roddenberry. which who knows? There's
I never knew there was a possibility that Gene Roddenberry could be involved in the show. So,
and you were a Trek fan at that point?
Always. I've been a Trek fan since I was in grade school.
Well, if you're interested, you should watch our show, The Center Seat.
And it's on...
it was on History Channel last year, but I think it's going to end up at another streamer that you're not crazy about, maybe in the future. So
I'm not crazy about it?
Yeah, one that you've talked to about a lot today.
I'm not. Believe me, I'm not being critical of that streamer. I just think they need to get their act together.
No, we had this conversation before the hallway. I agreed entirely. So you mentioned somebody else we've mentioned in passing, Sam Simon. Did you have a lot of contact with Sam? What can you tell me about Sam?
Sam, well, I got to know Sam when he was executive producer on Taxi. He and Ken Aston were executive producers with Jim and Jim's whole pack of, Ed Weinberger, all those people. So I knew him from earlier in his career, and he was just one of those writers who was, along with Ken, very, very established as a writing team.
Did you have many dealings with him?
Yeah, I mean, he was a good guy. He's just, vegan. Which he was ahead of his time, and loved animals. I mean, he's a good guy, who eventually died of cancer, but yeah.
Yeah, people say he was really instrumental in actually making The Simpsons into what it was, but I guess that was once you'd left already, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd known him forever, so I mean, when whoever mentioned bringing him in, yeah, fine, Aston, Simon, I mean, these are people who are all comedy icons in the era.
Jerry Belson was involved with Altman as well, right?
Yep.
What can you tell me about him?
I did not know him very well. I mean, I met him certainly.
Sorry.
Jerry Belson. Jerry Belson was involved with Tracy Ullman, also sort of a comedy legend, executive producer, writer, and he was on the stage. I mean, the whole writing team on Tracy Ullman was like an all-star team of writers. Chris Lloyd's dad was a writer on the Tracy Ullman show. So there's Chris Lloyd doing, Modern Family, and he comes from comedy royalty already.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then the writer's room that Sam Simon put together is the stuff of TV Legend too, right?
At Simpsons, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I'm trying to think of all the people, because, well, I was never in the writer's room, actually, because I just wasn't. I mean, I would hang out mostly with Jim and Richard. Generally, you're not in the writer's room. If you're an executive, you're not in the writer's room.
No, I know. That's why it's interesting.
And I don't think we should be in the writer's room, by the way, because we're just a distraction. What are we doing in the writer's room? I'll give you my notes and I'll leave and let you do your thing.
Interesting. I'm glad you mentioned that. Legend has it that part of the deal was that you guys, the network, didn't get to note Simpsons. That's not true?
I don't know.
Were you noting Simpsons?
No, but I didn't note it for the. I wouldn't note Jim Brooks anyway, so it really is academic. I mean, I wasn't noting Taxi. I mean, why would you? I mean, it's like saying to Susan Harris when we're doing Golden Girls, yeah, I know you've done all these shows like, Soap and, all these shows, but, on Golden Girls, I have some questions about this Rose character.
Well, you say that, but that the business is filled with stories about network execs noting people who have made 57 hit things, and it's a 30-year-old guy.
I do understand that, but I think it's a terrible thing to do to a really talented writer. It's one thing to do it to someone who's really clueless, of which there are quite a few, but you should be able to give 5 notes or less to executive producer writer who's making a show, and it better be short, sweet, and really damn important. And so a lot of times the notes would be more like, I don't think that guy's the right lead. or this, something very critical to the centrality of it. And that would be done in the casting room, not at the table read. You know, when you're talking about really great writers, you're not going to, the notes are going to be pretty minimal. Yes, I know the paradigm, which is probably true, I guess, of people with no clue giving notes to people who've made 40 TV shows. But it's not really, I don't think it's really that true. Or maybe I'm just not exposed to those people, because I would hate to be exposed to those people, because I would probably take them into the woodshed and beat them.
I'm thinking you're probably like the good executive that doesn't do that, but there's a lot who do.
Yeah, but it doesn't, you know, here's why it's not a smart thing to do. If you have to give more than 5 notes, you've hired the wrong producers.
Yeah, exactly. Or they're making a show that's not a show you want, right?
Well, it's not, I don't even think it's about whether it's the show you want or not. It's about, you know, somebody has to have a vision of what that's going to look like at the end. And it's going to be the writer. And so, you know, the notes to J.J. Abrams on Felicity were non-existent. The argument with J.J. Abrams when we were putting together the cast of Felicity was who should be the 2 love interests in this triangle, and how should they relate to each other? And that happened in the casting room. And J.J. was great about that.
I'm sure you had opinions about cutting the hair.
I didn't know about that. I was at NBC when that happened.
You always leave before the company.
No. I went back, but I did ask Suzanne Daniels, my lieutenant, when I was at NBC. She took over, and she unwisely gave permission to cut the hair. I don't know why. You can ask her for that.
That's so funny. That was a weird detour we took there. Hey, I have a question. Going back to you metaphorically were willing to walk over glass to get Brooks to come over to
Yes.
the network. Is it true, because I've read somewhere, but, you know, again, I want to know from you, because who knows who's writing this stuff I'm reading online.
Sure.
That part of it was his deal with Fox Studios was up as well, and it was sort of brought together to entice him to renew with them and sign on with the network.
No, I don't think that's true.
No?
I don't. I mean, no. There's no way that giving him a show on Fox Broadcasting would have kept him at Fox if he didn't want to be there.
Okay, so that's just...
That's complete nonsense.
Okay.
I can say that with complete authority. That would be silly.
Yeah, supposedly his deal had to be renewed at the studio, but you have no reason to think he wasn't happy there, right?
I think his deal at the studio was primarily for movies, not for TV.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The story is that he has a deal with the studio for his movies.
Right.
You guys wanted him to do a network show.
Right.
I guess the deal was up with the studio and had to be renegotiated, and the theory is that was sweetened for him in order to add the network. But you're saying they're not connected.
No, they're not connected.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
He's Jim Brooks. He's a multi-Oscar winner. Why you're not a recent multi-Oscar winner at that point?
I have a bad question for you about him.
Hmm?
What do you think happened to his movie career?
I don't really know. I mean, you know,
And by the way, let me just preface this by saying, I asked that not like the way some people do. I think if you make one good movie, you justify your career, and he's made more than one good movie. But,
no, he's made quite a few good
Yeah.
movies. I think the answer to that is actually slightly more complicated, which is that the movie business is completely different than it was even 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Every single movie now that really is a hit movie is not about human beings interacting. It's about, you know, the Marvel universe or the DC comic universe, or it's for kids, or it's animated. You know, movies about real human beings, you know, rom-coms, whatever you want to call them, you know, they're older, you know, adults don't go to movies.
It's a genre studios aren't interested in making anymore. Right?
Because those people won't go to a movie theater. And I know, you know, I was watching the NATO thing that just happened down in wherever with the exhibitors, and like everyone's kidding themselves. They're thinking like, okay, we can get older people back to watch movies. No, you can't. Those people are at home watching streaming services on their 49, 60-inch, 80-inch 4K TV. They're not going back to a movie theater just because you sell popcorn at $5 a bucket and Cokes at $4 a sip, and they're just not going.
Yeah, I mean that ship was sailing already, but I think COVID sealed it.
It's been sailing for a while. COVID sealed it, and you look at, I mean, name me an adult movie, not like an X-rated movie, a movie for adults that has succeeded at the box office in the last 5 years. And no, there's no question, COVID made it worse.
Yeah.
But, I love West Side Story. I thought it was a brilliant movie, despite some of my colleagues giving grief to one thing or another. I thought it was a really brilliant movie. No one saw it in a movie theater. I had friends who went to the Man Chinese Theater. There were 6 people in the audience. That's not true for Batman. It's not true for Spider-Man. That's not true for, Doctor Strange. So, hey, get a clue.
I'm guilty of it. I haven't been to a movie since COVID started.
I am neither.
Yeah, not one, because you can see everything basically at home immediately or soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have to say, The Northman is the first thing that's made me think, like, maybe I want to go to the theater again.
Sure.
But
You could do that.
But I haven't.
No, I don't think this is, I think it's, this has been going this way for a while. There are way less movies being made, and the big hits are driving more and more of the box office, and the sort of middle to independent level is driving much less of the box office. I just don't think that's a really viable plan going forward. And I think if you're Netflix or your Apple Plus or your HBO Max, you make the movies. You're gonna. By the way, I was thrilled that Disney Plus put West Side Story up on the service because I'd seen the movie 3 times at that point at home, and I wanted more people to see it.
All right, this is where I have to confess to you that I'm Puerto Rican, so I've never seen it.
Oh, okay.
I have not seen it. I have not seen it. I should see it.
Why?
I don't like the old one.
I think you'll like the new one.
Yeah?
It's much more. Well, first of all, you don't have white actors playing Puerto Rican parts.
Right.
That alone
was problematic,
was somewhat disqualifying. I agree. It's really quite well reimagined by Steven Spielberg, and the casting is reimagined. The woman who plays Maria is a huge star,
And he knows how to direct too, as we know.
Yeah, he knows how to direct. Trust me, he knows how to direct. This is like you sit there watching and go like, holy mackerel, who came up with this way to do this song? Because songs that were clearly just lifted from the Broadway play were completely reimagined for the movie screen in a way they were not in the 1961 version.
Yeah, you convinced me to check it out.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I'll check it out. There's so many interesting things to talk to you about, but we have to.
I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry. Sticking to Simpsons. One last thing is, like you said, these streamers are making movies, but are people watching them in enough? When you said that, what I thought of is Apple Plus made that Tom Hanks movie. With the robot or whatever.
Yeah, it was a terrible movie, though. I've seen it.
You've seen it. I haven't seen it.
You know why I saw it? I'll tell you why I saw it. I would never have seen it except I had a friend with kids over at my house, and I have a theater at home, and that's what they wanted to watch. I had not heard of the movie. I thought it was corny and not particularly good. But, Don't Look Up, Power of the Dog. I was upset that certain movies I really liked and watched, because I'm a voter. In BAFTA, not in the U.S. Academy, but in BAFTA. So I get all the copies to watch, and although all lockdown like so hard that it's very hard to put it on a screen, but you figure out a way. And I watched Licorice Pizza 3 times. I watched these. I think like movies like Licorice Pizza would have a hell of a lot more attention if they put them on a streamer than you put it in a movie theater.
Yeah.
I just don't think that's a viable business anymore.
Certainly at that.
For
that size.
How many people do you think would have gone to see Power of the Dog in a theater?
Nobody.
Right.
I mean, even before COVID. Yeah,
Right. what's the one the year before, the really boring movie that won the Academy Award?
Oh, I never saw it, but I know what you're talking about. The one that Frances McDormand.
Yes.
I forgot. What
Horrible.
Nomadland.
Yeah,
Nomadland?
it made $1.2 million at the box office, or some ridiculous number like that. And I'm thinking like, this is why the Oscars have become irrelevant.
Well, I saw the trailer for that, and I was like, I'm not going to watch it.
Well, I tried to watch it all the way through. I didn't get it all the way through.
Yeah.
But the thing I'm hopeful about with the streamers is if they become the new movie theaters in some combination with movie theaters for those who want the popcorn, the bad popcorn, the bad hot dogs, great. Then we can all see the movies. They can monetize them correctly. They can be on the big screen. And by the way, at my house and most people's houses, they're on a big screen anyway. You know, what person you know does not have at least like a 60-inch TV?
Nobody in this town.
No. So this has to change. It has to change.
So The Simpsons.
Yes. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I'm the one leading.
No, I'm very passionate about this, and I hate when I see this convention where they are showing some great movies, things that are going to appeal to kids. You know, they talk about, you know, Wonka and all this guy. Fine, they're going to go see that. That's not the question. The question is, when's the next a movie for adults that's going to be seen by people?
Right.
All right.
Tell me before you. So when you left, they're in production already on that first season, right?
Yes, they made it because we bought them all at once.
Right. So are you seeing cuts of these? Are you seeing these things when the episodes are being completed?
I think I saw some pencil tests, but not finished episodes.
Your gut was telling you this is going to work,
Yes.
or this is way out on a limb.
No, I thought this is going to work.
Why?
I wouldn't have even made the argument in the first place if I didn't think it was going to work.
What made you think it was going to work?
I liked it.
Is it that simple, or was it just your faith in Brooks?
No, I liked it. It's not just always just faith in another person. It's
No, that's
also
what I asked you. You said I liked it. You liked the shorts. You'd
Yes,
the shorts,
yes.
You could see this as a short.
yeah. And the pencil tests were close. You know, pencil tests are just black and white, and you know, animation. I mean, it's pretty clear if it's going to work or not.
It comes out. I know you're not there anymore,
Hmm?
but you're alive on the planet Earth when it comes out.
And believe me, I got the Simpsons people give me tons of Simpsons stuff. I have a Simpsons pinball machine at home. I have lots of stuff.
Well, I was about to talk about this stuff. It comes out and you thought it would work. You didn't think it was going to work like this, right? I mean, this is
No,
like,
because how would you ever think that?
Can you tell me about that? I mean, this thing goes around the globe in record time. Bartmania. I mean, in my lifetime, the only thing I can think of that even approached it was probably when the first Star Wars came out, right? Run around the globe. I mean,
It's impossible. Let me try to put this into a soundbite. At the end of the day, no one knows how big a hit something will be. Your job is just to make sure you're in the ballpark of a hit. And if you can do that more often than not, you're successful. So no one goes, oh my God, that will be the biggest hit of all time, or anything like that. I mean, I've been involved with shows where I go like, I don't know. I mean, it's good. It's really good. I don't know if the audience will accept it, but I like it. And yeah, and those are the bets you take.
and this bet, I mean.
Well, this is obviously extraordinary bet.
Yeah. Tell me, for those, there's going to be somebody watching this that wasn't alive when it came out.
So yeah, well, for sure, a lot of people.
So I want you to. Well, this show's lasted forever.
30 years.
Yeah, they're on season 33, I think, right?
Yeah, I don't know anymore.
So tell me, describe the you were watching from afar, but you were involved, obviously. You were watching this. This thing blew up. I mean, describe the scale of the way this thing stormed the world.
Well, as I said, I can't say that to you, as I said, because I can connect to anything you have. I was very pleased that Jim and Richard and Sam had this thing. And they're very gracious about because they knew the whole backstory of how it came together. So I was thrilled for them when it became a big hit. But as I said, you don't ever know how big a hit something's going to be or how impactful it's going to be on society. So when you put on a show that everyone tells you is not going to work, like The West Wing, and then it works, you're like, wow, there are people out there who are getting this, who are understanding what the subtleties of this are. Not that The Simpsons had the subtleties of West Wing.
No, but you just said something interesting. You said there were people against West Wing. We didn't discuss this. Obviously, there were enough people at Fox in favor of this that you were able to get this through, and Barry agreed, and you told the white lie story. Were there executives saying this is stupid, this is a waste of time and money?
No.
No, there was no pushback?
No. Now, granted, it wasn't discussed in a big group. It was, with West Wing, the president of NBC, the whole corporation, said to me over dinner, "It's on your head. I would not put this on."
Really?
I said, "Okay, I feel strongly about this show, and I want to put it on the air."
How quickly after premiere were you laughing at them?
I never laugh at people on that issue because
Inside your head.
I don't. That's not my job. Is not to laugh at people. My job is to make as many good shows as possible and expose them to people.
I worded it wrong. How long after premiere did you feel vindicated? I'm just curious.
Well, it was already big the first couple weeks, so it was not a big problem.
Yeah, I remember. Simpsons. Well, Simpsons, you didn't need to feel vindicated. It sounds like everyone was on board, right?
Yeah, they just didn't want to make a bigger commitment. That was the only. That's why you do a white lie. It's because everyone knows it's special. Mm-hmm. So if you can get it over the hump to where it's practical, then you do it.
What about the scale of merchandising that went along with this?
Well, I didn't see that coming.
Can you say that on camera?
I had never before been involved, before The Simpsons, in a show that had literally billions of dollars worth of merchandising. I did later in some other shows that were kid shows, but not in a primetime show. And this was like, this was well beyond the lunchbox crowd. This was everywhere in society. It's phenomenal, and no one could have seen that coming.
And another aspect of Simpsons' success that I think is interesting in retrospect, and it was, late 80s, early 90s is a different world than we live in today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing nobody really thought about how it would work internationally, because it really did.
No, we didn't really think about it internationally, but we probably should have, in that the one thing about The Simpsons, which is sort of something people don't really think about, and I didn't really think about it until I saw it, is that you can, it's very easy to dub different languages into those characters' mouths because they're not lip synced. So all of a sudden, today we think of Netflix as having this great machine that dubs in every country with local actors and all that. With The Simpsons, because you could put almost anything in their mouths that would look like it was fine, it was easy to see how it could play overseas.
And it did. Everywhere. Like even, South America, like even markets where shows didn't often travel, right? I don't,
it's, yeah, but it's, yeah.
But what did that?
No, I'm thinking about something right now. I tried, at one point when I was at Turner later, I tried, I did actually buy the canceled episodes of Family Guy and put them on. And my team brought me the proposal. I go like, so we can buy all the Family Guy episodes for $35,000 an episode with a right to bring the show back if it succeeds? Go make the deal. Leave the room now. Go make the deal. But I tried to get The Simpsons for TBS and Cartoon Network, Adult Swim, whatever. And I said, look, Jim, you got a zillion episodes. Why don't you see if it can be split like early years, later years, and early years can go here, later years can go there. And Fox shut that down pretty fast.
Yeah. I mean, this is their crown jewel, right?
I know, but I had to try.
Sure, of course, it makes sense. What do you think, we keep referring to, it's on season 33. What do you think has made this thing work? And you're the right person to ask this because you think a lot about why TV shows work, or not.
I think the show has continued to remain relevant and fresh and often quite topical, very much like South Park has. And that makes it sort of evergreen. It's not quite as topical as South Park, obviously, but South Park will do jokes from the prior week. But this is, they do actually keep a lot of topicality in that catalog.
You know, you've mentioned Family Guy and you mentioned South Park a couple of times. There's like, primetime animation basically was dormant in the United States until Simpsons. There's all these shows now.
But it was dormant, but it was a real genre. It just was, no one had gone back there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, Jetsons, Flintstones. Somebody told me there was a primetime Johnny Quest cartoon that did.
Oh, I didn't know. I remember Johnny Quest as a kid, but I never saw the primetime one.
Yeah, it was news to me too. But which means it wasn't that big. And Jetsons and Flintstones I grew up with as Saturday morning stuff.
Right.
But I guess it, you know, in its inception. It's a genre now. I mean, animation, Futurama, King of the Hill, Family Guy. I'm just thinking there's an animated Star Trek series now on Paramount.
There is. Yeah, there's. Yeah. Not only that, but if you look at the animation genre in film, it's one of the tried and true ways to get younger people into the theater. I mean, there's every studio has, you know, Comcast takes over Universal, creates Illumination, which is their, you know, animated studio. You know, Disney doubles down in that area with Pixar and all that. Everyone now does some level of animated IP in their film library.
Well, it's interesting because what I was going to ask you is how has Simpsons, you know, sort of revived that genre of animated primetime animation, but you're expanding it to the movies as well, right?
Well, it's cultural. Once you do it on television, you can do it anywhere.
Can you elaborate on that? Give it to me from the camera.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about The Simpsons in particular is it came around at a time when there was no animation on television to speak of, other than, you know, bad Saturday morning animation, and no animation in films that I can think of. Maybe wrong, but I didn't think of any. And now it's the staple of both. It's a staple of both television and film. I mean, I think a lot of film studios do quite a big percentage of the releases are animated releases.
It's interesting because there's such long production times on those things.
Yeah, but if you're only making one, it's not as bad as if you're making, you know, 24.
True. I guess it's worse if the one tanks though.
Yeah, it's really yeah. I mean, I'm not a big fan of animated movies. I mean, I go see them, but it's like it's you know, the ones that are really great. I mean, I love South Park. So, I mean, I was watching the COVID specials over the last few months. They're just surreal.
I haven't seen them. I haven't seen South Park in a while, I have to admit.
Well, they did, you know, it's on, they're doing full-length movies on Paramount Plus, and they're pretty great. And it's another show that's just been going on forever. And those guys are sick and twisted. And I like Sick and Twisted, so I like to watch them.
Did you become a Simpsons viewer, or were you too busy?
No, I became a Simpsons viewer, but I'm not. You know, you can't watch everything all the time. I mean, you know, if I, you know, and sometimes you can have head-snapping days where, like, you're watching Severance and then you're watching an episode of something silly, you know, like South Park.
Over the years, do you dip in and check on Simpsons?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like what? Once a year?
Yeah, like once a year, once a season.
What have you observed over its long haul?
I'm just impressed that they can keep it relatively fresh at this point. And there's so many characters that I don't keep track of that when the New York Times crossword puzzle says he's the saloon keeper in The Simpsons, it's a crossword clue. Like, it's like asking me, like, find Moldova on the map. It's just not something I'm going to get right.
Well, I think most of us are going to find Moldova on the map soon.
Yeah.
But Springfield. Do you have favorite characters? Do you have favorite episodes? Do you have favorite anything?
No, you can't have a show with this many characters and this many years and have favorites.
Well, I'm asking only because, listen, I watched the first 6 seasons probably.
Right.
My life went on, and then once in a while I'll look, but I don't think I've seen anything that they've made in the last 5 years.
Well, it's hard in broadcast television. It's pretty hard to remember to tune in Sunday night at 9.
I mean, I don't watch TV that way.
Yeah, I don't watch. I mean, and the few shows that are left on TV that I do watch are all ending.
What do you think of?
New Amsterdam, I like. They're finishing off their show. Good Doctor has sort of lost its steam, and everything else is kind of there's been no comedy hits that I can think of, and there's no zeitgeist in primetime network television anymore.
Well, is that even possible anymore? I mean, because of the way we all have 10,000 streaming services and we're all watching different things. I mean, that water cooler show, is that possible?
It's obviously very difficult. I mean, I don't think I'd want to be in any of those chairs today trying to have a hit show on networks that generally average about 1 to 2 rating. It's really hard to, when The Cosby Show was on, the Cosby Show had episodes that did north of a 30 rating.
I mean,
that's just insane.
Yeah.
Those are not quite Super Bowl levels. That just doesn't happen.
I'm glad you brought that up. What did you think when they pitted Simpsons against Cosby Show?
I thought it was clever.
Well, tell me what you think is clever. You got to say it for the camera.
Oh, I think it was a clever and brave move to put Simpsons against the Cosby Show back in the day. It was a way for Fox to say, "Hey, look at us, we're here." It's sort of like when I was involved in that. I wasn't involved in Living Color going during the halftime show of the Super Bowl, but those are clever, brave ideas, and good for you. You make people stand up and pay attention if you compete with the Super Bowl halftime show with a live episode of In Living Color.
I mean, it's clever. It's because it's what David has to do to get in Goliath's face, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And it generally, you don't even have to win, right? It's just doing it.
Yep.
Yeah.
But by the way, we back when I used to work for Brandon Tartikoff, if we worked on a show that killed another iconic show, he would give us the scheduling card for the show we killed. So one of the shows so we would.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what'd you kill?
Well, Golden Girls at 9 killed Love Boat. So I got the Love Boat card. And then I got the Magnum PI card for Cosby. I mean, there's always an evolution of these hit shows. And Brandon loved, he was very competitive. He loved handing people cards of shows they'd killed.
That's great. It's like a catch, right?
Yeah.
We've mentioned him a lot. Legends grow after people pass away. Was he as smart and sharp as people say?
Yes. Yeah. And very creative.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a different kind of intelligence than Barry.
Sorry, use his name.
I'm sorry.
No worries.
Brandon Tartikoff had a different kind of intelligence than Barry Diller has. Barry Diller has a really well-tuned, Socratic method, sometimes tortuous, of getting the best out of everyone at a table. Brandon was just a fountain of ideas, some good, some terrible, but always very interesting bets.
Got it. We talked. I'm just looking to see how we're doing. We talked about your 5 notes rule.
Well, by the way, that is my rule. This is not. I'm not making it up for you. That is my rule.
No,
You
that's
don't.
why. Listen, research has said, tell us about your rule, which you did already. I know it's your rule. Do you know anything about Sam Simon's poker games?
I don't know. There were different poker games over the years. Barry used to be on Poker Game with Jim.
Tell me about that.
And that had Carson in it as well. So you may know about it from the late night thing. It was Carson, Jim Brooks, Barry Diller. I'm not sure who else was at the table, but you can ask Jim. Find
Yeah,
out.
how about you?
Or
Have you
Barry.
been to any poker?
No, I'm not a good poker player. I'd be a great person to win all the money from.
Yeah, I just get rolled. Hold on one second. Let me see. Klasky Chupo, you had no contact with,
No.
right?
I thought, what I heard about at the time was just that there was a feeling that they just weren't doing great animated work, and they just wanted to make a change. I didn't hear anything more than that.
And it went to Film Roman.
I guess so. It went to a different animation house.
Yeah, Film
Yeah.
Roman, which is still doing it, and actually Phil Roman is coming to talk to us next week, and I think he's in his 90s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I just remember when the Klasky Chupo building was on Fountain and La Brea, and they had Simpsons characters all over the building, which obviously had to be taken down later.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, now they have a place I think on is it Highland? It has like the Rugrats and stuff on it.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, it makes sense.
Yeah. Let me see. Classic Chupo. You don't know about Classic Chupo. What do you? Okay, we keep talking about the length of this show. It's simple universality. It's simply, actually, as a network. Actually, here, I take that back. Let me rephrase this. I'm constantly amazed. When I was an agent, let me put it this way. You get an actor on a hit show, series regular on a hit show, even if the show works, it seldom goes beyond 7 seasons because, as you know, they have to renegotiate, right? And it gets more expensive.
I've done it.
Yeah, we had, our agency. We had David Hyde Pierce on Frasier, and Frasier's a show that everyone in the cast would have kept going, but basically the decision was made. It's simply too expensive to keep going.
Yeah, well, talk to me about the Friends cast someday.
Exactly. So I'm constantly amazed at how is Simpsons economically viable at this point? That it really must make that much money, right?
And also, it's voice talent, so it's not quite the same as.
Not voice talent, but they gotta have.
They do have good deals, I'm sure, but it's still, you don't have to fire up a stage, and you don't have to make someone look like they're 30 years ago. I mean, the great thing is no one ever ages on the show. This is not like when I was a kid and you watched the Brady Bunch, and all of a sudden you go, "Mommy, all the kids are young again," in the repeats.
Yeah. But you and I both know over the last 20 years, the spectator sport in town has been watching the VO renegotiations on Simpsons, right? It's always in the trades. Harry Shearer's always saying something out of line.
Yeah, well, that's Harry.
What do you think about those?
I'm sympathetic because I know actors, have tough lives. Let's just put it that way. Actors have tough lives. And so I don't blame actors for trying to get what they can when they can get it. But most of them have no sense of what it's like to actually take all the elements of the show and make a profit at the end of the day. So, yeah, there's lots of situations where people, feel like they're worth more than the show can afford, and they may be, but the show can't afford it. So, in the best situations, you can talk talent down to a reasonable number to keep a show going.
Season 33, how long do you think it's going to go?
I actually am surprised it's gone this long. It's hard for me to believe it's gone this long. Because at a certain point, how do you exploit all those negatives?
What do you mean by that?
Well, how do you mean once where you're going to put them all? It's like Saturday Night Live. You're going to put them all on streaming service and watch every season, every episode. It's overwhelming.
I think they're going to Disney Plus, aren't they?
Where are they now?
I think they're right.
Oh, they're on Disney Plus.
Yeah, I think they are.
Oh, yeah, they're probably.
Recently just went to Disney Plus.
But the question is, okay, how many more seasons do you need?
You don't. They've got 25 more seasons than they need, right? I mean.
25 more seasons than they need.
Yeah.
I mean, the question is just, what's the benefit of making more at a certain point?
Well, it's interesting because you're very tuned to the streaming stuff. I had one of the original writers here, John Beatty.
Oh, yeah.
And John said that he always wondered, he's like, it's great that it's still going and everything, but he's like, I've always wondered if the show did, let's say 15 years and ended. He goes, I'm sure by now it would be being revived for a streamer. And he's like, I'd be very interested to see what it would become in a different medium like that.
Well, I don't think streaming is a different medium. I think streaming is television. So I don't think it would be, when people reboot shows, generally what they reboot is not as good as the original. So I wouldn't, every time people reboot it, I think like, are there no good ideas? You've never developed anything before?
Well, it's interesting to hear you say that because I think most of the public always thinks like, why are they doing that again? Why are they doing that again? Like,
well, yeah.
It works once in a while. I mean, Battlestar
very rarely, man.
Probably.
I sit there and look at like, really seriously, you're going to reboot Charmed? We did Charmed the first time. What are you going to do now? I mean, it's indestructible. It's still playing every day on TNT.
And listen, no offense, I booked many actors on Charmed, but nobody needs to reboot Charmed.
No, but they did reboot it.
I know.
Okay,
yeah.
And not only did they reboot it, but they made it more ethnic.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, one of the key things about My Family Rule cannot happen, which is they're three sisters who happen to be good witches.
Right.
And now they're not three sisters.
Right. But you can have surrogate families, like you said, like the Cheers, right?
It's true, but they didn't quite get it right.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't need to. A producer's asking me, you were saying parallel about animation coming back at the time in film and whatever. Simpsons did pretty much coincide with Disney coming back, right? With animated features, Little Mermaid was like 89.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I was I was at Disney for Little Mermaid, yeah.
Yeah.
That was the first one they did in the modern era.
Right,
that was a big...
when
Yeah,
Katzenberg
yeah. Jeffrey, I actually watched Little Mermaid on a chem with Jeffrey because he had one set up outside his office, and he was looking at the ending. He was looking at the ending of Little Mermaid, and where all the fish are singing, and it says, he goes, more fish. More singing fish, more singing happy dolphins. I'm going like, oh, God, this will stick in my memory for a very long time.
That's funny. It worked.
Yeah, he was right.
Yeah, it worked. That was Disney's revival. There's a great, I just forgot the name of it. There's a great documentary about that, about him bringing it back. Sleeping Beauty Awakens or Sleeping Beauty, something like that. It was about basically Disney having another wave of animation.
But that was really, you're absolutely right, that was Jeffrey's initiative and really what he was great at it.
He made that happen.
He made that happen, and by sheer force of will. And I think he also helped put together the team. I don't know who put together the team, but I'm sure he had to have a lot to do with it. The writing team that did the books and the songs, and because I know that, was it Tim Rice or?
Yeah, you're talking about the lyricist that did it?
Yeah.
The guy who passed away that did Lion King?
I know that certain people have passed away.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I just don't. I can't remember off the top of my head because I have. Yeah. Because really, they haven't had anything like that in a while.
Oh, this is funny. Sorry. Zasha sent me. This is a funny quote I've heard from Mike Reese.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. He says, people always ask, I'm reading this to you to get your reaction.
No, I know, and Mike Reese is a very big part of the show, but later on.
Sure,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
He says, people always ask, Mike Reese wrote, people always ask him when The Simpsons ends, and he goes, my response is always the same. Stop asking me, it's rude. It's like saying, hey, Grandma, when are you going to die? She doesn't know, and she doesn't want to think about it. Stop asking.
Yeah. It's a good point.
Let me just keep
There was a joke last night on Seth Meyers that was along those lines of like unplugging grandma's machine.
unplug the show. Well, Al, you know what? I'm also another amazing things about Simpson is Al Jean has been the showrunner for.
Is it recent, Gene, or just?
Now it's just Al.
Okay.
I think they had a period where they did it together, right?
Yeah.
Early on.
Yeah.
But I think it's been Al Jean show running for like 15 years now. Oh, you know what? In the last season, he's got somebody with him again. I just don't remember who it is. But I was gonna say, is that the longest show running gig in history?
I don't know.
Yeah. How can you still run a show that long?
You can. It takes generally a really. You're refreshing your team all the time. I mean, I know. I remember years ago Jim saying he was really going to try to refresh the show, but this was a long time ago that he felt like it wasn't up to snuff anymore. He was going to do some refreshment to the team, but I don't know
what season that was around.
It's at least 10 years ago.
At least 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I always wonder how did they? Because when we did the Star Trek doc, they mentioned this problem too. They get to the point where you have so many hundreds of episodes that people are innocently pitching the ideas that have been done again because they don't have the prior knowledge. And on Star Trek they were saying it became almost impossible to police that because there was nobody who had all of it in their head anymore. Simpsons has got to have passed that point too.
Absolutely, Simpsons has it. It's true of a number of shows. Back when CBS had all the procedural dramas, they had to police how people were killed in various shows each week. Like on CSI, they were asphyxiated, but then they were shot on or buried in the earth on CSI Miami, and everything was like, we have to make sure we don't have 2 asphyxiations in a week.
Oh, that's funny. I remember CSI Miami lasted so long that Nan Dutton, the casting director, she always told me, like, I can't reuse people on this show.
And they're dead.
Well, she's like, I can't well, yeah, but she's like, I can't reuse your actors on the show. If they've already done season 3, they did season 4. And I remember when they hit 10, she called me and she goes, I've been told I can reuse people. So she started,
By the way, that it will happen to a certain point. You say you've run out of actors to kill.
Yeah.
In the opening 5 minute smash cut to main titles, somebody's got to die.
I want to ask you this, and take a minute to think about this.
Okay.
What do you want to tell me? What do you want to share about Simpsons that I don't know enough to have asked you about? Is there something about your involvement in it that you're like, nobody ever asked me this?
No, because my involvement really was only at the very, very beginning of it. I mean, I don't. What I'm trying to say is, I'm most interested in a show in the very beginning when we figure out how to track it and make it something cool and interesting and new and fresh. And I'm not that person who comes in year 3 and goes like, oh God, I know how to make it fresh again. It's just that's not my strength. So I was fortunate enough to be involved with this show very early in its lifespan. And so I appreciate it. I appreciate Simpsons for what it is and what it started as and how it evolved and who did what. But you're right. After 30 years, it's hard to get excited about any individual episodes or storylines. I think when I think of shows, I think of like with Star Trek. What was fascinating to me is that, okay, you have Star Trek and you have Battlestar Galactica. Why is one so much better than the other? I mean, they both have the same basic hardware and all this kind of stuff. Well, one is a morality tale about good and evil, and the other one is kind of just like a video game. And so I obviously never met Gene Roddenberry, but he had a very, very clear idea of how he wanted to frame the Federation versus the Klingon Empire or whatever over the, and it's completely a parallel to the world we're still living in today. So I know that when there's something that intrinsically basic about the premise, that's fascinating to see all the different variations it takes. I mean, the Klingons would be doing what the Russians are doing in Ukraine right now.
Yeah, they're behaving very Klingon-y.
Yeah.
It's interesting. A friend of mine is a very successful TV writer, and I'm curious your thoughts about this. He says the premise of a TV show, because he's very into launching shows, which is what you do too. I'd say you have the serial entrepreneur personality. You start it and move on.
Kind of.
Okay. Well, I've known you for 2 hours. Give me a break. He says that the premise of a show has to be like designing an airframe for an aircraft. And he goes, the better the premise, the better the airframe, the more different kinds of weather it can fly through without crashing. So he always cites Doctor Who as being like a perfect airframe. He's like, you could literally write 10,000 episodes of that show. It doesn't matter because the premise is so flexible. I'm curious if you have thoughts about that, because you're looking at a lot of shows and deciding what goes, you're deciding if they've got a good airframe, right?
Yes. The difference with Doctor Who, though, and remember, I wasn't a big fan of Doctor Who before I got to BBC, is so many different great writers in Britain have written the show. You know, from Russell T Davies to everyone and their brother. And they change the Doctor every couple of years. And so I think they're on the 12th Doctor now or something. That they get to re-explore the world outside that telephone booth every new set of episodes. They also don't make that many episodes. You know, the thing about Doctor Who is, and all the British shows, is American television is essentially becoming like British television, where like I used to sit at BBC in London and try to lecture to all the controllers at BBC 1, 2, 3, and 4 about why they should make more episodes of things. And I remember one of the controllers, very famous controller, I won't name him, I said, you know, you did 13 episodes, 12 episodes in a Christmas special of The Office. NBC's already made 150 episodes of The Office. Is there any way to convince you to make more? And they go, no, if we make more 13s, we can only make half as many 6s. Like, okay, clearly this message is not getting through.
But it's interesting, and to your point, we're making shows like that now.
No, we are doing, and the difference in Britain is that and the streamers are basically doing it for different reasons, but not really, which is that a show really is one person's vision. You know, if it's, you know, one of the things I love about Russell T Davies is he's done everything from It's a Sin to the original Queer as Folk to a very English Scandal to all the. It's just everything he writes is very different
and all good.
And all good. And
interesting enough, he's back.
He's always back.
No, I mean they hired him. He's the new showrunner on Doctor Who.
Oh, he's going back to Doctor
Yeah,
Who. I didn't know that.
Yeah, the next season is going to be he's show running it again, which is weird. I can't think of a time where that's happened too. I guess Al Jean on Simpsons, but
yeah, but Britain's it's just such a tiny group of writers who write everything, and it is a really great market for writers. I mean, that's where they. So actually, when J.J. Abrams hired the head of BBC Drama to be head of his production company, I thought, like, that's a smart idea. This guy knows he's got to tap a new talent pool, and he doesn't know who they are. And that guy, I think it was Ben Stevens, or Ben Stevens' son, was head of drama at BBC, and he knows every writer in Britain, and he has experience with them, so now you're going to have some really fresh writing.
Do you think, though, that most people that I know that work in the industry think the less episodes format is good. I mean,
Yeah.
the agents we didn't because
No, because less commission.
less commissions. But I remember interviewing, not Ron Moore, but the other guy, Brian Braga, who was a showrunner on Star Trek for years and years.
Yep.
And he's looking back at it and he says, he's like, when we were doing 22, 24, it's like, it's brutal. He goes, as a rule, if you look at these seasons, he's like, it's just, you can't avoid it. Episodes 17, 18, 19 suck. And he goes, then you get to 20 and then you see the finish line and then the gas goes back.
You're describing actually how every single show that was full length back in the day felt. I mean, you would get people come in fresh as a daisy after the summer. They'd sit around and pitch stories, all that shit. And somewhere around episode 15, they would go, oh my God, we have 8 more to go. And they would start crashing and burning around you. And then they get a second wind. Literally, this is like every show does this. They get a second wind somewhere around 19, like, oh, we only have, we can limp to 22. No, we can limp, because a lot of shows were doing 24 at that point. And it's like, you could see it, the fatigue on these people's faces.
Yeah, if I remember right, Law and Order occasionally did 26.
Yeah, but Dick has that machine. He can make as many widgets as he calls them widgets. I don't call them widgets. He calls them widgets.
It works.
And the guy has more shows on television because they're kind of all from the same blueprint.
Yeah. Is there anything I haven't been smart enough to ask you want to share with me?
No,
About
on The Simpsons. No, I mean I think that's you're reminding me why the show was so tectonic at the time, and the only thing I would say to you that was always amused me is having gone through that sort of ordeal, which Barry understandably put us through to get the 13-episode order. It was funny to then see Barry on the cover of Time magazine around with his arm around Bart Simpson, and going like, yeah. I remember that argument about getting a 13-episode order now.
Well, that's the way it is. I realized I've been remiss. I haven't really asked you about one person, Matt Groening. We didn't really talk about him.
Yeah, I mean, I met him. I talked to. I know him. Matt Groening. Is it Groening or Gray?
I think he's pronounced Groening.
Groening. I met Matt early on. It seemed very nice. I have the original copies of his Love is Hell, Life is Hell, School is Hell books, which I sort of cherish. It's just a cool thing to have. Didn't really wasn't around him that much.
No, I understand. Your job, you were at a certain level.
No, I mean, I don't mean to be, it's just like, I don't think it should be,
No, I'm not saying that you, I'm saying I understand your job. You're overseeing other things too.
But also, I'm much more a fan, I hang out with way more writers than I do with actors.
Yeah.
I'm big, I give complete props to writers because I think like nothing happens unless it's on the page.
Well, TV is the writer's medium, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anything else, Garth, before I let you go? You're giving me so much of your time.
Nope. I think that's, I can't think of anything else on The Simpsons. You pick my brain, 6 other, multiple other shows, but this is, I know no one's ever going to start a network again. In fact, I'd say we're probably going to be down one in the next few years, maybe more than one. We're almost down one now, in that nobody's making anything but game shows, and I keep kidding with people saying we're going back to the 50s. This is name that tune. It's like, can you dance? Can you sing and dance? Do you know this trivia question? It's like the programming is getting less and less expensive and more disposable all the time.
I couldn't agree with you more. When I was a kid, we lived in Europe in the 80s, and I remember looking at European TV and going, American TV is so much better. All they do is put like stupid game shows on and variety shows, and literally our TV now looks a lot like European TV in the 80s.
I totally agree, and that's why one of the things I was really fascinated about by my experience of working in international television with BBC was, oh my God, this is the only company in the world that produces the majority of their own programming. Because every other broadcaster in the world, the majority of their primetime schedule is American shows. And you realize why the world sees America the way it does, because it sees America through its TV shows.
Totally. And yeah, England, by the way, I'll take UK out. They're the exception.
They are the exception.
Continental European TV was basically just, you're right, variety shows, game shows, local news, and A-Team, Knight Rider, Star Trek. That's all it was, basically.
Right.
You know, usually dubbed in Flemish or, you know.
Well, yeah. I mean, I hate to tell you this, but I started learning which countries would be dubbed, which countries would be subtitles and subtitled, and which countries would be lectured.
Oh, yeah, lectured. Is it they actually stand there and do it?
No, they do it off screen, I think.
Yeah.
But like Poland was not a country we either dub or do subtitles for. It would be lectured, which someone would tell you what's going on.
Oh, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I'll tell you where I've seen that, oddly enough, Moscow. I went years ago, put on TV, they had something on MTV. I can't remember what it was now. What was the thing on MTV where people live in the house of the real life?
Oh, Real World.
Real World. Sorry, I've seen it.
Hard to dub that.
No, and it's just a Russian voice talking over the show, but they leave the original soundtrack on, so it's headache inducing.
Yeah, I mean, but you know, the thing I think is great about Netflix, since I have to say something nice about Netflix, is that the people I know. I recommended their head of engineering came from BBC America. I recommended him for the job, and he did an amazing job of launching it all around the world. And he was the guy who figured out how to make PAL and CCAM and NTSC all work together. He did it at BBC, he did it there. And then he also now runs the organization that organizes all the dubbing and lip syncing of every country in the world, that organization. And what Netflix has done, which is good, is they have tapped into entirely new pools of talent to do shows. And so you see completely different points of view on the world than you saw before. And and they're really the only ones that's done that.
Right, and they've gotten their Squid Game, and they've gotten their House of Paper, or whatever it's called, Casa de Papel, the one from Spain.
Well, it's every show. It's crazy how it's been done really well. Some are still subtitled, but a lot is local voices in country, which is really hard to do well. And I think that's great that they do it. And you're introducing new voices, new creative voices to the world, who would never, who the fuck was thinking about Korean drama 3 years ago? I don't know. Maybe K-pop, but not that. Anyway, that's good.
Garth, thank you so much.
Sure.
This has been great.
Okay.